Good. So yeah, I'll click here. That'll be like my little clacker thing, and I'll do my intro now. So, hello, how are we doing today, guys? I am the average centrist, and I'm here today with Courtney Coulson. Is it Coulson? Coulson?
It is Coulson. Thank you. People keep mispronouncing it, but it's in the Marvel movies. Just listen to that.
There you go. So, I'm here today with Courtney, and she is a detransitioned female to male to female. Is that correct?
Yes. It gets very confusing. So a detrans woman is not the same as a trans woman.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, she's agreed to come on to the show today, and this is like the first one of these kinds of interviews that I'm going to be doing, and I'm looking forward and hoping, fingers crossed, that I can get more in the future. And the whole point of this series is to basically expand on the dialogue that's happening around different kinds of movements. And it just so happens that we're starting off with the trans discussion at the moment. And I want to have all different voices from all different sides come on and express their point of view on the subject. And I thought it'd be really, really interesting to start off with somebody who is someone who is detransitioned, because when it comes to the trans discussion, I find most of the time it's either super pro-trans people or really angry people who are really against trans people, and everybody just talks past each other and nothing gets solved, nothing really gets learned, and we're just not really getting anywhere. So yeah. I want to kind of offer a place for people to come who can basically just say how they feel without fear of, me, the host, coming after them, trying to get gotchas, trying to do this, that, and the other thing. I don't want to do that. I just want people to say how they feel, and I don't know, just open it up. I just want it to be opened up a little bit more, because I just feel at the minute like it's just really not going anywhere.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a very topical issue at the moment, and I feel the most vocal people are the people who know the least about what they're talking about.
Yeah, it does seem that way. I mean, and especially like on both sides, I would say that there's a lot of and this goes for almost anything that you can think of, but for this topic in particular, there's a lot of misinformation on both sides. I find that like the kind of radical TERF side have a very skewed vision of what trans people are, but I also find that the super pro-trans people also have a very warped view of like what the reality around the situation of being trans and stuff like that for cis people, if that makes sense. Yeah. I think, I just want to expose that a little bit and get people talking, and hopefully in the future, fingers crossed, maybe even getting some debates on the go. But I don't know, because it depends, because we all know...
I would love to get on a debate. I haven't really, other than just people screaming at me on Tumblr or Reddit or what have you, I haven't actually had a proper dialogue. It's either the SJWs or it's the Christians who are angry at me. It's, every day I open up my YouTube manager app, whatever, it's generally them. Or someone telling me that I'm just a Capricorn and that's my only problem.
Man, people who boil things down to astronomy are just... they're too far gone.
It's because I'm left-handed. I'm clearly a disciple of Satan, so that's, of course.
It explains a lot, actually, yeah.
You know what? Okay. We can cut this interview short. We've already figured out my problem. It's fine.
Yeah, it's just the left-handedness. Burner at the stake. It's all fine.
Exactly.
So before we get into like the meat and potatoes of the discussion, I just wanted you to give us a brief little rundown of your journey, because obviously you started off female, you transitioned to male, now you've detransitioned back to female. And so, yeah, if you want to just give us a little intro into your journey.
Yeah, I need to create some kind of elevator pitch or like a Fresh Prince of Bel-Air style rap so I can succinctly summarize my life story, because, good Lord, it's complicated. But I've always been, well, not always, but from about the age of about 10 or 11 onwards, I was a very strange child. and my issues just sort of built up and built up. So they thought I might be autistic from the age of 11 onwards.
Okay.
Might have been a gastrointestinal thing. Didn't develop a libido, so I thought I was asexual. So I was already kind of, on the fringes. Didn't feel like other girls. Not like other girls, yes. And then didn't know, raised Catholic, so I didn't know about transgender people or cross-dressing or any of that. And so I learned when I was 19, when I went to university, a drag queen explained the difference to me. And then all of a sudden, at the age of 23, just spontaneously went, yes, I'm a boy. And jumped headlong into it and didn't really have any sort of therapy or psychological evaluation. And then all of a sudden, just as abruptly, I woke up and realized, oh, no, I'm not transgender at all. And really, it was more of a split personality thing, which I guess we can get into later. But there were red flags. There were huge red flags.
Sure. And I actually want to speak about that process a little bit, because you said that there was no real medical evaluation on the situation. And I just wondered what that looks like in Australia. You are Australia, isn't it? Perth is Australia.
Yeah, so I'm in Perth, WA, and I think the policies are changing all the time. But I'm 29 now. I transitioned when I was 23, and it was basically saw a GP. They referred me to an endocrinologist, who then told me to see a psychologist and a psychiatrist that they picked. And I went to the let me get it right. So the psychiatrist, he asked me all these really cliche questions and really didn't go in depth. He just like, do you have masculine interests? Do you have more male friends than female friends? Very cliche things like that.
Okay.
And of course, the trans community tells you how you should answer these questions. It's, I always felt trans. Yeah, I was always, but not like other girls. So turns out all girls are not like other girls.
Yeah. It turns out most men also vary on how they feel about masculinity, but
funny.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and so the psychologist, I saw her a couple of times, and she said, I think I still want to keep seeing you. So she obviously sensed there was something up with me. So she didn't want to write me a letter. The psychiatrist did, but the psychologist said, yeah, let's make a few more appointments. I, being just a bull at a gate, really wanted to transition. I thought, well, what if I make an appointment with the endocrinologist? And, we can just talk about it, and I can see what I'm getting into and if it's really worth it. I thought that was a sensible thing to do. And no, it was a very rushed procedure where she didn't ask for the letters. So I did have the letter from the psychiatrist, but she did not ask for any letters. Then blood tests, prescribing me hormones, and next minute my voice is deepening and got facial hair grown, and that's how it was. What is it, 4 or 5 years? So I lost track. Yeah.
Okay, so when it comes, how long was that process roughly? Would you say?
Okay, so 23 was when I started the hormones, pretty sure, yeah.
Oh, I meant the process before, because I'm assuming the hormones were state mandated, so you got those on a prescription or something.
Yeah, I should write out a time, because I cut my hair when I was 22, then it would have been hormones by 23, so it was about a year. The whole thing was about a year.
Okay, so it was actually lengthy-ish then. It wasn't just a couple of months process, so that's not too bad. Just because part of the thing that I worry about is that on the very pro-trans side, they're very down for basically just making the process so easy that you can just walk into a doctor's and just get hormones whenever you want. Which
I think is absolutely insane, because as an insane person, I can tell you, when you're in a psychotic episode or a dissociative episode, you think you're totally in control and in charge of your faculties. You're not. When you're in that state, you just feel the same as always. You don't really know the difference. So in my case, I'm very unusual. Don't really know what it is exactly, but it's just kind of DID or dissociative episode where this other personality, Connor, who is a robot, took over, and At first, it was like this artificial intelligence inside the back of my head, and then he took over my body, and I disappeared. For 5 years, I just wasn't really here. It's really difficult to explain, because I have all of his memories, mostly, and he had most of mine, but I was a completely different person. He had to learn to make friends with my friends all over again, and the episodes are getting less and less frequent. He hasn't taken over, but just this morning, we've never had a conversation with... This sounds insane. We've never had a conversation with each other before.
Yeah.
But we kind of did this morning. So I don't know if that means I'm getting better or not. Who can say? At least I'm aware I'm crazy.
Okay. I mean, I find it fascinating that you're so candid about it as well, which is part of the main reason why I was drawn to you, and I was so happy when you got back to me, because I've been trying to set up these kinds of conversations for a long time. That's why I haven't really been doing other content on my YouTube channel. I've been trying to get more into like back and forth, like interesting discussions, but that's kind of besides the point. But like I reached out to you and you got back to me, and I was just so happy. Like I couldn't believe it, because like you're one of the more, like, I've looked at a few different people who are detransitioners, but you're one of the more interesting ones, because you do you do have this whole thing with which we'll get into a bit more in a bit, but like you've developed some strange fetishes, and you which
I'm telling the whole internet about what I do in my bedroom,
which
so, yeah.
I find hilarious, and I'm so happy that you're so candid in sharing them, because I think it really does highlight like some issues which I've thought about a lot. Especially when in relation to the trans situation. So
yeah, I think it's, well, first of all, I have something called emotional analgesia, which is a term I coined, so trademark, Courtney Coulson.
Sweet, it sounds very professional. I like it.
Yeah, I know my Latin. It's basically where I cannot feel emotional pain. So I don't have fear, I don't have shame. So that's why, more so than anyone else talking about their detrans experiences, I'm just very straight up, because there are some times when I'm watching that upload bar going, should I put that up? I don't give a shit, honestly. What is someone going to do? Judge me? Why would I care? And another thing that really inspired me was, there was this writer, she only passed away a couple of years ago. She was really big in the feminist scene and sexology, Betty Dodson.
Oh, I do know the name.
Back in the 70s and 80s, she wrote some very controversial books about female sexuality, about masturbation, and I thought, this is the shit we need to bring back. We need to just be more open and honest about these basic aspects of our body, because we're all, especially girls, are getting the wrong ideas.
Sure, like I actually find that really interesting, like because I wonder what you think about, like, when you say that girls are getting the wrong ideas. What do you mean by that more specifically?
I think, especially nowadays, that you've got girls going on Instagram and TikTok and all of that, and you're seeing these, what are unflatteringly referred to as thoughts.
Yeah,
and
sure.
They are just, they've got the pumped up lips and the perfect makeup, and just everything is so fake and feminine, and they look like Bratz dolls. And I think for young girls, they think that's what boys want, and they also watch pornography, and they get other ideas. Like, apparently choking is kind of a pandemic right now, because all these teenage boys as well, are getting this idea of, oh, that's what sex is. And no one's correcting them. There's no one out there. I kind of want to be the YouTube aunt. I want to be out there saying, hey, guys, don't have to rush into anything, and you don't have to label anything. And yeah, kids especially love, well, humans in general are tribalist, and children especially love to categorize things. And so they go, well, this is what girls are like, but I'm not like other girls. I'm into nerd stuff, or I like cars. Not the way I like cars, but yeah, and all that sort of stuff. And the truth is, you can be into whatever. You can be a gamer girl, you can be an athlete, you can be whatever, and it doesn't mean that you're any less of a woman. Yeah. But even when I was growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, there was this idea of, this is a girl, but I'm not like them. And boys were also affirming that, where they go, oh, you're much cooler than normal girls. I think boys are probably still saying that and not realizing the harm that causes.
Yeah, I think, well, obviously, especially teenagers, they're not going to know what the hell they're talking about. But, like...
Don't know their asses from their elbows, frankly.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. So it's one of them where, of course, those kind of confusions are going to happen for younger people. But, like, one thing I do appreciate is... and this is one thing that I do kind of gel with feminism with. I'm not really a feminist so much, but one thing that I do like the idea of is if I ever have a daughter, I don't want her to ever think that the way to move through the world is by exploiting her sexuality. And I want her to think like the way to attract a man is through the mind rather than through the body. Because, you know, at the end of the day, beauty speaks for itself anyway. You don't really need to exploit it realistically. It's just there.
And charisma is way sexier than anything your face can be doing.
And I think sorry, go on.
And we don't see that much with even female celebrities where, say, Gal Gadot, for example, I think she's actually very charismatic. But most of the time in the media, I don't even see her speak. It's just the image of her and someone else is speaking for her.
I mean, I can't speak to her so much, to be honest. But, the thing with, the other girls, I'm different to the other girls kind of a thing. I think a lot of men are picking up on, or at least the disconnect between men and women. This is just a little theory of mine, but, the reason men feel that way is because so many girls do go down the road of basically being more interested in figuring out their physical beauty rather than their inner beauty, I suppose you could say.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of that as well. And there is just, having been on both sides of the gender divide, I could say that women are intimidated by men and men are intimidated by women.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody knows how everyone else functions. And it's, what is it? Lacanian psychology is something that I've gotten interested in lately because I've been researching for my Blade Runner podcast, and they seem to have opinions, the Lacanian psychologists. But how it relates to this is the fundamental principle of Lacanian psychology is that we're all fundamentally alone inside our heads. And there's this disconnect between who we think we are, the vast universe inside our brain, and the image we see in the mirror. And so a lot of anxieties and conflicts and all that, I think, do stem from this fundamental divorce between who we think we are, who we think we should be, and who we actually physically are to the eyes of everyone around us.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that. I think that is perception is a big thing. So yeah, I guess it would be that, wouldn't it? Just generally speaking. Yeah. Sorry, I'm having.
It's okay, because I was going to say that, especially from my perspective, and I'm having some of these old anxiety issues coming back again, where people are more critical of my appearance. When I was a man, people would just say, oh, you're very nicely dressed, or your hair is nice, or, sometimes I'd get compliments, but no one was hypercritical, and no one was condescending. Now I'm a woman again, a lot of that bullshit is coming back, but I'm older, I'm tougher, I can handle it, but I can absolutely understand why a lot of these girls want to transition to boys. I absolutely understand the appeal of, well, then people will take me seriously, and then people will see something more than just a pretty face.
So is that a problem within men specifically, or is this kind of more like a cultural problem where men and women kind of propagate and I feel like, and this just goes back to what we were saying before, but maybe there's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if a lot of women are going down the road of just kind of getting into their physical standards without really upping the mental, and men are kind of feeling disconnected from women because of that, on a certain level, but then they also feed into it because they also like to drool over women who are attractive and stuff like that. So that kind of reinforces that stereotype. But then women are also reinforcing it because they always constantly go on about how people are looking and stuff like that as well. One thing I always notice with women is that, like, when they meet up, one of the first things they ever say to each other is how good they look to each other, and they say that all the time. And, like, don't get me wrong, fine if that does something for your confidence or whatever. But I do notice that with women, they really do focus on it quite a lot. And, like, I don't like when I yeah, and it's something that, like, I find a little strange because growing up, one of the things that used to be told to me about women was, women don't care about looks and stuff like that, and, like, especially when it came to men, like, they were like, oh, they don't really care about looks as long as you can do this or that or the other thing or whatever. But, like, just that idea of women don't care about looks, like, the more I've gotten older, the more I've thought, well, how true is that? Because it seems like a lot of women really care about looks.
When it comes to men, women aren't that fussed about appearance. I mean, look at Benedict Cumberbatch or Matt Smith or any of these weirdos that girls just go nuts over for some reason. And when it comes to other women, they're hypercritical. Women are the worst critics of other women. My mother, for example, wow, we made it how far in without mentioning my mom? Yeah, she just goes, oh, you didn't fill in your eyebrows, or you should use a different this, that, and the other makeup. And it's just like, look, I'm wearing pants. I put makeup on. Good enough. I'm not going down a runway, but women are often like that, where you go, oh, well, your nails weren't manicured, but everything else was. Why would you not do your nails? Who cares? Yeah. Whereas, they don't have that level of criticism against men. Never.
Which, well, the thing with it that I find a little interesting is that, like, I can't, for that particular problem, I don't know whether the answer lies in women just deciding to have a bit of more of a discussion within themselves about their own beauty standards and what they propagate. And if they changed it, I reckon a lot of men, I don't think they'd have a lot to say, to be honest with you, because men tend to just go for whatever they can get, realistically.
Turbocharged this, like, evolutionary arms race of looks. I am a bit of a 1980s film historian, and just watching how beauty standards have changed post-internet, it's crazy. Because, so from probably about, I don't know, when television was a bit more mainstream and available, you look at how women appeared in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. It's still fairly natural. I mean, boob jobs are coming into the mainstream and all of that. But for whatever reason, I would say probably about 2005, 2010 onwards, suddenly everyone looks like Kim Kardashian. Yeah. You look on Instagram and these women aren't celebrities. They're just average women, but they're getting boob jobs and butt implants, and they're all wearing the yoga pants, and they've got everything looks like Kim Kardashian. I don't know why that's become the look now.
And that can't really be explained by patriarchy, because these are women making those decisions, influencing other women to do things as well, and women are choosing to do it.
Media has forced them all to look at it. It's like you've put all women in a circular room, and they're all facing each other, and they're all hypercritical, and it's... We've never, as far as I know, had anything like this culturally throughout history. I mean, you look at ancient Greece, and there was an absolute adoration of the male form. It's almost the opposite now. Women were considered kind of deformed men, and men were just, that was the pinnacle of beauty, their musculature, their power. It was super gay, and at least by our modern standards. And so now it's totally flipped, and it is just momentary. I don't think this is something that is going to last forever, but it is fun to look back through even my own lifetime and see that we've gone from a more natural girl next door aesthetic to this impossible Megan Fox, Kim Kardashian archetype.
Which, honestly, I'm not going to lie, I think for a lot of, like, regular people, is just not what people actually like. Like in my day-to-day life. In my day-to-day life, like, I don't meet a lot of guys who they might like the idea of this like celebrity looking woman. But in like real life, when they meet girls, if they've got like lip implants and like a weird looking face because they've had surgery or whatever they've done, like people get put off by it. Like a lot of guys don't even like heavy makeup, let alone body alterations and stuff like that. So
yeah. I think I've been watching WandaVision, and Elizabeth Olsen is stunning to me, and it's a very natural face, and she's got very minimal makeup, and yeah, that's what I like, and I think most people do.
Yeah, so I always wonder, like, you know, I feel like these standards could easily change, but I think part of the reason that they don't is because some of the more powerful cultural influences, like feminism, for instance, are not particularly introspective on themselves, and they never really take a time out to go, okay, yes, maybe the patriarchy exists or whatever. I'm not really here to have that debate right now, but like if regardless of that, is there any other time where women can take responsibility for their own actions and what they put out into the culture? I don't really see a lot of feminists really doing that. It seems to me that like a lot of feminism is based around the idea of just outsourcing the blame so that they don't ever have to really take any responsibility for themselves.
Yeah, it's peacocking. It is the tail of the peacock just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it's at a point now where it can't fly and is really inconvenient. And at least for human beings, this isn't something that's built into us. We could, at any point, change, and I hope we do at some point soon. Also, in ancient Egypt, that was another culture that was more interested in male beauty. Men, when wearing makeup, and the fashion, men's fashion, from what little we have left of that period, men's fashion changed so radically, and it was so extravagant, lots of jewelry. Women, on the other hand, very simple white tunics and a collar. There's a name for that, but yeah, that's basically what women were. Kind of second-class citizens, even in the fashion realm.
It is interesting, the swings and roundabouts between like different ways in which men and women interacted throughout history. Because Vikings are also another interesting way to look at it, because the Vikings didn't really make a huge distinction between men and women, and they would actually have female fighters in their raiding parties. So, like, you know, oh god, my microphone just fell over.
What did what?
Yeah, sorry, I might have to. Ooh, no. But yeah, they would have female fighters in their raiding parties. So, you know, if you're you know, you'd have equal opportunity rapes and pillaging. You know, it'd be it was a good time all around for the Vikings. You know?
I do think looking back at history is really instructive when it comes to understanding gender and understanding ourselves just within the greater context of our history. And that's why I would love at some point to get my mum and my grandmother on to my YouTube channel, and we can talk about that, because I am very certain that within a century, we have already gone from one extreme to the other in how we view gender, sexuality, all of that. Right now, we're in the weirdest time in history. There's never been a time where people were creating 500 names for the same thing, and then we had to ultra specifically diagnose or label everything. And actually, in my latest video, I came to that conclusion that it might unintentionally be the cause might be psychology, because psychology is all about diagnosis. It's all about putting a specific name on a thing. And so when it came to sexuality and gender, I think a lot of these depressed, anxious kids started thinking, well, but I feel kind of like this some days, and then I feel like this. Oh, I must be bi-gender. And they make up a new term. And there was no scientific backing for that. They would start instead pulling from ancient indigenous cultures that would have these concepts of the plural gender, or people who were not one or the other, not understanding the full cultural context of that. You can't just pull from some ancient culture you're not a part of and go, yeah, that's what I am. No, you're not Two-Spirit. You're not Native American. Yeah. And Two-Spirit means something very different to a Native American.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously I understand that's like a kind of basic, or not basic, but like, I understand why they conflate the two, basically, because obviously the ideas are coming from a pretty similar root place. However, though, I do think that culturally, the way that was executed is so different to how people are trying to execute it today. Like,
Yeah, as I understand these whole two spirit roles and similar things in other indigenous cultures, it's more like a role that you are assigned to, or it's sort of you kind of. It is a role like a shaman or a priest or something. It has a more significant feature within a community.
yeah, it seemed like it was one of those things where it was kind of rare, but like they would generally accept it, and the people, and like it just wasn't like a huge deal, which honestly is fair enough. But at the time, I guess these people, they weren't having surgeries, they weren't having hormones and all this kind of stuff.
I think that's the major difference too, is if I had gone through my mental break and there wasn't the option of physically disfiguring myself, then it really wouldn't be an issue. And, you know, these cases like that James Younger, where this 7-year-old boy almost underwent all this hormone replacement therapy, none of that would be a risk, because if a kid just, as they used to do, went through that phase of exploring their gender identity and said, well, you know, I'm a girl now. Okay, James, we can call you Jane, and we'll keep calling you that until you decide that you're more accepting of your body. We don't have that anymore.
Yeah, it does seem like, I mean, at the minute we do kind of have it. Like you say, I don't know what the laws are in Australia, but over here, pretty sure in the UK, we can't like have kids getting onto hormones and stuff like that. And if they do,
yeah,
I think
but there is blockers, and the blockers are really just as bad. There's really, in my mind, there's no difference between puberty blockers and taking hormone replacement therapy, because they have almost the exact same effects on the body. You know, changes your physical and neurological development. It causes infertility. These are not things that I transitioned when I was 23. I didn't think I wanted kids, and then all of a sudden at about 28, I just went, no, I really want kids. You can't know yourself. We never truly know ourselves, but you can especially not know yourself under the age of about 20. Your brain is still developing, I think,
until about 26. Yeah,
26.
So yeah, and I agree. Like, I think, like, you know, and you notice like a radical difference in yourself even from 20 to 21, and then like,
oh my god,
yeah, and like, so when you're in those final stages of brain development up until 26, like each year is such a radical change in how you are as a person, that I just think, like, you know, it is a bit irresponsible. Like, even at that age, which we consider adults, people are fundamentally, we know people aren't necessarily themselves at this point, and yet we're still, people are still thinking about wanting to give kids under the age of 16 the ability to make vast life-changing decisions for themselves. And I just think that's like, it just seems to run counter to everything else that we've decided for society, like when it comes to sex, when it comes to cigarettes, when it comes to alcohol, when it comes to driving, when it comes to like, you know, even movies have age ratings on them.
Yeah, you're telling me that a kid can decide to chop up their genitals, but they're not allowed to watch, I don't know, Deadpool in the cinemas unaccompanied? What?
It's just, I don't understand how everyone can kind of have this nuanced and what's the word? A kind of logical take on like some of these other things, but then when it comes to the trans issue, it's almost like logic is just out of the window.
Oh yeah, because no one wants to be the bully. No one wants to be the unwoke one, because it's fashionable to be woke now. And I encountered this, I'm a carnivore, and I encountered this with the vegan community, where they will throw all these facts and figures at you, but if you actually know how to do research correctly, I did 3 years at university, almost graduated, then I got sick, but I learned in my librarianship degree how to do proper research, how to cite sources, how to track back who is funding these studies, who's doing the study, all of that. I know what I'm looking for. And the issue with when it comes to diet, climate change, gender. There's a lot of people with vested interests, so they are going to skew the data, cherry pick results. You can't trust what you read. And the problem with vegans and these trans advocates is that they are just so focused on their perspective, and they know that their perspective is right, that they are unwilling to have that conversation. And I think, well, their biology is partly to blame, because if you're vegan, you're malnourished. If you're trans, you're on hormones. So you can't regulate your emotions. You cannot think sensibly and have a calm, rational conversation. The moment someone says, are you sure that they don't kill millions of animals every year to make crops? Are you sure? They just flip out, Kill Bill alarm sounds, go block everybody.
Yeah.
Same thing with trans people. We go, are you sure that puberty blockers don't call you blocked? You can't even finish.
Yeah, and again, this brings me back to why I want to do this series, is because that happens too much, and it hurts cis people and it hurts trans people, because it means
echo chambers don't help anybody, except maybe dolphins.
Because don't get me wrong, like, I actually think there should be trans rights and stuff like that. But if we're gonna get there, we need to be able to have open discussions about it, and it has to be able to suit and compromise with cis people and trans people together. There has to be some level of doing that, where we safeguard things for cis people and for trans people. And that's when we're getting into like much more of the details of like trans policy and what that's going to look like in law. But like, I do think that...
You know what it reminds me of is the whole abortion debate. Before abortion became more readily available and accepted, there was this, you had people on one extreme and then you had people on the other, and they, to perpetuate or to strengthen their argument, they would come up with a lot of bullshit. And so, yeah, if you had abortion completely unregulated, you'd have the same situation that we're having here, where people are having abortions that they don't want to, they're being bullied into it, or they're not going through the process in a healthy, safe way, they're not being informed correctly, they're doing it underage, they're doing whatever. If we did not have policies in place for safe, informed abortions, it would look like what the trans situation looks like now, where it is just... there are no safeguards in place. We are just... It's a freaking Titanic right now. We are just sinking and nothing can stop it.
Well, it seems like you say, in Australia and here in the UK, we do have some level of safeguard. I will say that it seems it's a bit touch and go about how actually secure it really is. But like,
I think
they're trying.
In theory, if all my doctors and therapists and stuff had done as what they were supposed to do, then I probably wouldn't be in this situation. But they were very lax, because there is just such a push for, pro-affirmation all the way. And from everything I've been reading, before this whole gender pandemic took off, it was more a case of everyone goes through a phase of questioning their gender identity, and they'll experiment. Doesn't mean that you got to that you are 100% trans and that you have to transition immediately. And I have three thoughts at once. Which one am I going with? So the whole modification of the body, I think, is where the biggest arguments lie, because trans people are bloody dramatic. And their whole thing is, well, if we don't transition, then we'll be deformed and we'll be suicidal and depressed and I'm going to kill myself. And it's just... calm the fuck down. You are not going to do that, because therapy, support, all of those things. And recent studies have come out. They actually did a retraction and stated that, well, actually, the studies show that transitioning does not cure mental health issues. Yeah. Not even at all. I mean, to a little degree, but yeah, I think for a lot of people who are seduced by the idea of transitioning, these are people who already have mental health issues. Every detrans person I talk to has huge red flags that were somehow overlooked. They were bullied, their parents divorced, they were sexually abused, they, went through gay conversion therapy, whatever it was, there was a reason why they started to just intensely hate their bodies. And I don't really know what my issue was. Maybe it was chronic fatigue syndrome. That's the only thing I can point to. Because, yeah, all of a sudden I just had this intense and profound disgust with myself. And then you talk to the trans community, like, yeah, having tits is disgusting. And a vagina, ew, what is that about? And then they just perpetuate this idea in your head.
I mean, I've been listening to some of the like kind of TERF stuff recently, and I have to say, like they make a lot of sense with certain things, but I don't really get on board with the radical feminist side. So, like,
the moment someone has radical in their title, you know they're not impartial.
Yeah, exactly, and I'm not necessarily looking for them to be impartial necessarily, but like, but they. Yeah, I can't even remember why I brought that up now. I was bringing that up. What did you just say? Sorry about...
we're talking about how the having to change the body to assume gender roles.
Oh, that was it. When you were talking about how it's disgusting to have boobs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
One of the radical feminist things that they say is that like the whole trans movement is somewhat based in misogyny. And and I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that. That's all. Like.
Yeah, I think that the reason why trans men are suddenly getting all this attention. So when I was transitioning, trans women were in the mainstream. You had that Laverne Cox and Kardashian. What's blanking on?
Oh yeah, I know who you mean. I can't think of the name either right now.
I don't care about the Kardashians. So. It was all trans women, and then suddenly it shifted to trans boys, because I think there was suddenly this epidemic of all these girls saying, "No, I'm a boy now," cutting their hair off, wearing binders. It is just so common. There are so many trans boys and non-binary people out there right now, and it is, I'm going to say, probably 90% of it is just that it is social dysphoria, that women have been made to feel uncomfortable, inferior, unsafe. You know, from a very young age, I was told about rape, and I remember lying in bed the night after I was told about rape, and I just went, oh my God, that's a scary... I thought death was the scariest thing. There's a thing scarier than rape? Than death? It's rape, okay. Yeah, to my 12-year-old brain. So ever since then, well, I'd say for every girl, from the moment you find out what that is, you're just suddenly on guard. You feel like you're Bambi in the forest and your mum's dead and you're all alone and anything can happen. I don't think we are supporting young women. We're not educating young women at all. There is, and especially post-internet, I think humanity was doing real good. Well, okay, we're doing okay. We're doing relatively okay. You know, especially from about the 60s to the 80s. Great time. Culture seemed to be on the up and up. Everything was good. And then the internet came along, and it was like just a slow downward spiral. It wasn't immediate, but it's been a slow downward spiral in terms of how we socialize, how we treat gender, how we communicate, all of that. It's just too easy to be an asshole.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm totally guilty of that. Like, absolutely.
When I was a teenager on the internet, just an absolute monster.
Yeah. And it's one of them where I have a little bit of a weird theory about the internet thing, but I kind of have a feeling that it's slowly turning everybody autistic. Because it's completely removing body language, tone, all that stuff. Because so many people just message through text now.
Yeah, and I'm an extrovert. You know, love socializing with people, but it feels like everyone around me is bloody neurotic. They're all introverts. They're all autism, ADHD, anxiety, depression. So I am just. I walk through life like I'm bulletproof, and then everyone around me is like, "Oh no, we probably shouldn't do that because who knows what could happen?" Just like, calm down, guys. You think of the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I know. And maybe they need to read some Meditations by Marcus Aurelius and get some stoicism in their lives.
Yes. Oh, yeah, Stoicism is my jam. We need to bring back Stoicism.
Absolutely, I completely agree. So one thing that we did touch on just a second ago was I guess I'm going to call it a trend because that's what I believe it to be. But like the issue with trans men, or should I say young girls wanting to transition, they're calling it rapid onset, whatever, rapid.
Yeah.
But I call it a trend. I call it a kind of hysteria.
You can call it both actually, because a trend, it's one of those funny words, like theory. When used scientifically, a trend could even refer to trends in climate or trends in meteorological phenomena. So you can, absolutely say it's rapid onset gender dysphoria, and it's a trend.
I mean, I think what I'm getting at though is that like when they say rapid onset dysphoria, what the implication is that this is some kind of a medical phenomenon. Where like there's this outbreak of dysphoria going on with people's minds.
Yeah, I mean, mass hysteria is a great way to put it. I was doing a little bit of research into that. So there was a case of one girl had Tourette's, and then suddenly every other girl in this school had Tourette's, and then mostly women in this community suddenly had all these weird Tourette's syndrome symptoms. And they figured, it was just a case of mass hysteria, which women are more prone to than men, because women are highly social creatures, and they are, more sensitive, more empathetic. So that's literally what happened, is just seeing one girl twitching and uncontrollably shaking and all that, and so, but suddenly I have it, and then it moves around. Weirdest thing for me, though, I was not around any trans people. I was the only trans person I knew. I was seeing a little bit of online, but I wasn't, like a lot of trans kids, was not following any transgender people on YouTube. I was watching, PewDiePie, H3, was not looking at trans stuff at all.
Okay.
And yet I fell into the same trap. And that's scary, because it's getting to the point now where you don't even have to be directly exposed. It's like radiation. You don't even know you've been exposed, but it's happened.
Yeah. And it is scary. And like, I like that you touched on that girls happen to be more inclined towards this as well, because it's something that I've been thinking about recently, like why are girls more prone to this kind of thing? Because it's not just the trans stuff, like stuff that I always think back to, where trends happen with really serious things that shouldn't really be becoming a trend. But in Wales, where I'm from, in the UK, years and years ago when I was a teenager, there was actually a trend of suicide in these young teenagers in this very particular place. I can't remember what Bridge End it was. And what happened was, like, week after week after week, people were killing themselves, and they were all connected, and they were all glorifying suicide and stuff like that. And it has literally become a fashion trend to commit suicide. And what I'm getting at here is that, like, obviously there were victims within that. They had to do loads of suicide prevention stuff, and like it became like a bit of a national thing for a little while. And then it kind of petered out and went away, and I think that's just because obviously people realise suicide isn't cool. But like,
you don't get extra lives once you do that.
Yeah, so it was one of them where, like, I think about stuff like that, and it was like there was a lot of young girls involved in it, and
there's a lot of. Just this morning I was watching a video about a string of student-on-student murders in Nagasaki in the early 2000s, and one girl. Well, actually, no. Who started? I can't remember which case, but the most famous one was this Japanese girl who was about 11, I think, and she had this feud with this other girl. Pulled her into a classroom one day when everyone else was going to lunch, slit her throat with a box cutter, and then there's a few other cases after. That was not the first case; it was a case before it. There's a few other cases after it, all in Nagasaki, all not that far from each other. And also, before the whole transgender thing, it was anorexia. I remember in high school, we were all told about anorexia is bad and don't do that. And I was sitting in class going, why would you do that? What's the point of that? And
I love a good meal.
Yeah. I'm hungry. I eat. It's not that complicated. And then, what was it before that? It was repressed memories.
Mm-hmm.
And then before
Religion.
that, the satanic panic was the other one.
Yeah, sure.
And just every single time, people are super suggestible. And I used to be quite arrogant and thought, I'm logical. I am better than the average person. And no, I'm not. I'm just as stupid as the rest of us, naked, upright monkeys. And we're highly suggestible. And to the point that you aren't even aware that you're being influenced, because we are not machines. We're not AI. We're not looking at things logically because we've never needed to until we created this modern environment. We are animals, and animals are running on instinct and what feels good, and just we live in the moment, basically.
Yeah, I guess like the way I think about that is that humanity runs according to the instinct of our survivability rather than what is literally the logic. So the logic always comes back to so for instance, the logic of religion is to do with our survivability. So that logic makes sense in terms of how we survive as a culture. You have you have 2-parent households. You don't have sex before marriage because of STDs. You don't you do all these different things to keep a cohesive.
And the obsession with life after death. Well, our basic instinct is to survive, but we know we die. So in our monkey brains, we go, well, that's not acceptable. We have to live forever. How do we live forever? Oh, well, there's a place in the sky that you go, and you just, it builds from there. That if you look at every aspect of human society, it all comes back to survival and sexual fitness. That's all it's about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think these are kind of these are just real truths that need to be acknowledged. Before you get into feminism, before you get into transgenderism, before you get into politics and stuff like that, I think it's really good to have a foundation in just realizing that our biology is so powerful that it's created so many different things, and to deny that is basically one of the most arrogant things I can think of. It's it's like these people that think that they can basically say that there's no difference between males and females, and that women and men have just been socially conditioned to be what they are, rather than thinking that maybe the biology has informed the gender roles. So if you
step back, I love the Carl Sagan pale blue dot thing, and every once in a while I just have that moment. I meditate on that, and I think about how tiny Earth is in the grand cosmos, and I think about where did we come from. I never think about we're in modern society and technology, and this is humanity. No. I think back to who we were in the jungle and what women were. We evolved to have sexual dimorphism. So some species don't have sexual dimorphism, or not very noticeable ones. A lot of reptiles kind of look basically the same, but mammals have a lot of sexual dimorphism, and humans especially. We have breasts on our chest from puberty onwards. That is really rare. There's no other mammal that has that. Why did we evolve that? Why did we evolve all the other traits? So women, obviously, are the ones raising children. Men were out going and hunting. So women had to be more social. They had to have more empathy. Everything is geared towards raising children. And I guess maybe feminism almost got in the way of that, because it's like, well, we don't have to just be baby makers. We don't have to be baby factories. We can be more than that. And you can.
Yeah.
But you have to remember that that's what your body was fundamentally geared towards.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm definitely noticing that now, for whatever reason, after I detransition, it's just like babies. Got to make babies. And and I am a lesbian, so there is the logic issue of, well, why am I attracted to women if I wish to make a baby? And also, I think about adoption, and logically I go, well, I should just adopt, Why do I want to have to go through all the difficulty and expense of pregnancy? But it's just this powerful instinct. I need to make my own babies because I'm a monkey, and that's all I need to do in life.
Yeah, and I think that that purpose to me is like a very, like, it's a supreme purpose, you know. Like, I think even if you don't believe in religion or whatever, like, I think it's one of the few things in life that actually gives a real, I guess you could call it a divine purpose or something. I think because it forces you to be empathetic. It forces you to actually care about somebody other than yourself. It forces you to actually think for the future. It forces you to think about more than just yourself. And I fair enough to people who don't want to have children and stuff like that. Like, you know, that's up to them. They can obviously choose that if that's what they want. But honestly, I
think that is actually probably part of the biology, that it takes all kinds to make a community. So that's why gay people naturally occur in a population. That's why some women are just naturally uninterested in reproduction. Maybe this is nature's way of kind of balancing out, preventing the overpopulation. But yeah, also looking at men, testosterone is a what do you call it? A steroid. It is something to increase muscle mass, aggression, and that's why we see men having certain stereotypical traits where they are interested in the acquisition of wealth and physical symbols of that, be that cars or houses or clothing, whatever. And that's why they're less empathetic, and they tend to approach problems from a very practical perspective. You know, if someone has a problem, they'll listen to that problem and go, okay, how do we solve this? Whereas women tend to just be like, well, how does that make you feel? And let's try and, you know, have some catharsis and come to an emotional resolution. And of course, not everyone's like that. I think there are some men, I have not cried since I was a child. There are some men who will cry at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
So obviously, we're not all the same. We're not made from the same cookie cutter mold. But there is obviously some underlying biology that we don't fully understand, but we know some of it.
Yeah, and I think, like, I'm in a weird position with this because I find myself in between where I do think that there's wiggle room on gender norms and roles. Like, I fully believe in that. Like, you know, it doesn't need to be so pre-prescribed, and it definitely doesn't need to be enshrined in law like it was, like, you know, in the 1950s or whatever. There's no need for the, you know, so I'm all fine with, like, equality on that aspect and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
However, I'm just not really into denying the biological side of it and how profound that is.
We're getting to this scary point where we're denying biology, and you've got, I remember I was watching this interview on YouTube. I can't remember the guy's name, but he had this, but she's basically a midwife on, and they were saying that you can't call pregnant women, you have to say pregnant people, and you can't say breastfeeders, you have to say chest feeders. Where you look, I support trans rights. For some people, for whatever, you know, I've listened to and I've read the autobiographies of people who seem to, for whatever reason, just not relate to their own bodies. You know, Buck Angel being a very famous example.
Yeah,
I couldn't imagine Buck Angel living as a woman. I think, look, he looks great and he seems really happy, and we don't really understand why he is the way he is. But I would never call him a she. I would never say he has to live as a woman. But for whatever reason, now we're getting to a point where, and he's great. A lot of trans people hate him because he's what they call a trans medicalist. What I call a fucking sane person. So if you are a sane person, you would understand that transsexuality is an aberration. It is a teratology, maybe not a deformity, but there's something not quite right here, because we don't see other species doing this where they will swap gender roles.
Not completely, but I will actually bring something up here that does actually somewhat reflect this behaviour, and it's in rats. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Ratopia.
Oh. No.
There's a really good video by, what's his name? I can't remember his name. Yes, he does Down the Rabbit Hole.
Oh, that Ratopia, the Rat City, yeah.
So there were rats.
I have no life and I've watched thousands of hours of YouTube, so yeah, I've probably seen it.
So in the Ratopia, for those that don't know, there is basically it's an experiment where they put loads of rats into this big thing and basically just watch their behavior, and they controlled different variables within the thing. So they gave them food, sometimes they gave them I think they even gave them drugs and stuff, like addictive type stuff, or maybe it was sugar, can't remember. But they did different things to try and get different results out of the rats, and as the Ratopia grew to certain levels, and they saw different behaviours in the rats, like there'd be alpha rats that would have a lot of women around them. Then there would be other rats who, and this is where we get to the trans thing, but there were certain rats who would respond to the sexual dynamics of the situation by becoming really invested in their self-grooming and not really being involved in the sexual side of things at all, really. And
that's true. And, fish, if you have a tank full of male fish, it's not all fish that can do this, but some fish, if it's just all male, then some of them will suddenly switch to female.
Yeah, same with, I think, is it toads or frogs? I can't remember, but they do a similar thing too.
That, to a degree. So there is some biological, and that's why I say trans people are real. But I think a lot of what we're seeing now is just social dysphoria. It is more about, especially women, feeling restricted by what they're supposed to be. I don't think it is a hatred for the body. It's the hatred for, men are looking at my tits. It's not, I hate having tits. It's, I don't want men looking at my tits.
Yeah, sure. So, and the whole thing with that motivation, I think is actually a pretty good... I think that's fairly close to it. I think there's other reasons. I think it's a multivariate thing. When it comes down to it, I don't know what you think of this, but I mean,
it's funny that all of life. The thing that blew my mind was I was watching a documentary about Charles Darwin, and they're talking about how we don't know what a species is. It's kind of like gradients. You look at a color wheel, a color spectrum. It's not like a hard line between yellow and green. You kind of get into this weird, not quite one or the other zone. And it's the same thing with species where you go, well, Neanderthal was kind of not human, but they also kind of were. And that made me realize that there are no hard definitions of anything in any aspect of reality other than man-made stuff. We're thinking of everything like machines. Maybe that's why I thought I was a machine for a while, because everything in our modern world is structured like a machine would structure it. The way we go to work, you have to be up at a certain time and go. Post-industrial society has treated humanity like machines.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that has clouded our judgment on how to do this kind of stuff, actually, and talk about it. And I guess I'm here to try and be... I can't remember what they were called. Those guys that wanted to smash up the machines in Italy. I can't remember. The Luddites or something.
Oh, the Luddites, yeah.
I guess I'm the Luddite of the cultural mechanisms, but I want people to recognise that, and I think the motivation of girls feeling like they kind of want to desexualise themselves in a certain aspect. I think that's definitely a big part of it. I also wonder, though, as well about the...
Oh, yeah, actually, I don't know if there were statistics on it, but in that Irreversible Damage book, they were talking about how so many of these trans boys, or detrans girls, they were very comfortable about sexuality. They were very slow to develop sexually, so they felt behind their peers, making them feel like, oh, I'm not like other girls. They had never masturbated, they had never dated, they were not familiar with their own bodies. A lot of them identify as asexual, and then all of a sudden they go, yeah, I'm a boy now. And I was one of them. Never touched myself, didn't have a libido, thought I was asexual. And so I thought, well, what do I even need to be a woman for? As if you need a permit to be a woman. Oh, well, you haven't done these requisite things to be a woman, so you hand in your lady license, I guess. And that's the thing. I don't think men ever feel quite the same way. I don't know what that is. I mean, men are often emasculated and made to feel like they're not man enough, but not to the extent they feel like, oh, I've got to hand in my man card and transition to a woman. They don't actually go to that extreme.
I think
but
for
women
men,
do.
I think for men, it's a little bit. It's a similar phenomenon, but on a different scale. I think a lot of men gravitate towards it and this is again just my little pocketbook theory, but like it's kind of born out of a bit more of a desperation of. I know that like a lot of men, they never get told they're beautiful and things like that. They want to experience that. I think a lot of men want to experience what it's like to be a woman, because I think a lot of men are jealous of how women move through the world, especially being able to take advantage of their sexuality in such a way. A lot of men don't have that. A lot of men are just considered ugly, realistically. And I think like they want to escape that pressure. I think also there's less expectation on women to do certain things. Obviously, I think that's less now, but like there's less expectation on a woman to be a breadwinner, to be a protector, to stand up for themselves, like to basically put themselves at a large amount of risk for other people or for men.
Yeah, you make a good point. So my middle brother, real good-looking kid, kind of looks like that boy who played the Flash on the CW.
Okay.
Looks a lot like him, actually. And, you know, I see girls love that actor, and my brother has no self-confidence, absolutely none. You know, very... he's a sensitive, kind boy with absolutely no self-esteem. He thinks he looks ugly. He does not. I mean, we're made of the same stock, so clearly.
Well, while we're being modest.
Yeah, no. Which leads me to a second point. My mom's just like, I don't understand how he could hate himself and you have this humongous ego. I'm like, I keep making egotistical jokes. I'm terrible for that because when I was growing up, I didn't think I was attractive, so I kept making those jokes, and I'm still stuck in that habit. So, whoops. Yeah, I guess I just sound like a bitch.
Whoops. I think it's fine. Whatever. Who cares?
Anyway, so yeah, I have a lot of confidence, which may come across as narcissism. I'm definitely not narcissistic, but I don't know why, for whatever, I don't know why, for whatever reason, I felt like I was more of a man than my brother, because that idea of being the breadwinner, having to work hard and being the one to initiate relationships and having to be strong and confident and never show emotions, like, that's my life. Whereas, yeah, for Jordan, he didn't fit into that role. Oops, I named him, but everyone on my social media would know.
Okay.
Yeah. He doesn't see himself that way. He sees that male archetype as just impossible and intimidating. So there is that issue as well, where I fit so easily into the male archetype and less so into the female archetype. So I had that confusion there. And then for my brother, I think that manifested in just feeling like, well, I'm not man enough. I'm a piece of shit. I'm just going to lock myself in my room and play video games until I die. That's basically his conclusion.
Yeah. I think it is a bit of a problem with men, because a lot of men do want to escape all that, and especially since feminism, I think feminism has basically said all these gender roles are irrelevant and men and women can do the same things. But what's happened is that has opened up a lot for women, and feminism has done a lot to try and break down those barriers for women to facilitate their move into the man's world, or whatever you want to call it. But hasn't really done anything for men in that respect. Like, they haven't said, women, we need to, instigate relationships more. They haven't done anything to, like, ease that pressure on men. They haven't, like, said, women, we need to take more responsibility for our physical safety.
The SJWs are all just like, men should fucking die, all men are evil. It's like, whoa, I thought you were about equality here, Jesus Christ. So because we are creating these barriers between the genders, it's ironic that right now I think we're so gender focused, where, well, especially, it's not the same in every country around the world, but it's especially in the Western world, Australia, Britain, America, and especially America, just everything gender, to the point that we're building up walls rather than tearing them down.
Yeah.
If we just stopped thinking about it so much, it wouldn't be a freaking issue. If we just saw men as the same as women and had the same consideration of, those issues we were mentioning about dating and just the basics of sexuality, sexual health. We aren't instructing either our boys or our girls when they're coming up through high school. We're not preparing either one of them to live healthy, happy lives. We're not.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem is that we are not acknowledging the biological aspects to the situation. And I know I keep bringing it back to that, but that's where I think, I think that is where we're having a big disconnect, because women don't want to face the fact that boys might actually behave in a way that is determined by their biology, and they just want to think everything's this blank slate, so they don't want to ever...
I can absolutely attest that when I was on testosterone, suddenly you're taking more risks. Even minor things of just walking out into traffic without leaving enough space so that the car doesn't have to slow down, just those little things. You feel bulletproof, you just want to show off, you turn into a freaking dickhead.
Yeah.
Teenage boys are dickheads.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like hormones, I think especially play a huge role in our behavior, and I think that men and women are expecting each other to communicate in the same way. Men do not talk the same way women talk. Absolutely. I would know that because I lived in two share houses with men exclusively. And the way they solve problems and the way they open up, it's just not the same way women do it. I wanted to speak to you about that a little bit. Sorry to cut you off, but I just, before we go into another tangent, but yes. I wanted to actually get a couple of views from your perspective of from being a woman to being a man, and how different you actually found it. Did you find yourself... I don't know. Actually, I'll ask more questions in a minute. What were some of the bigger differences that you noticed between the two?
Yeah, it is a really different experience where I felt people were suddenly listening to me more. They were taking me more seriously. I felt much more safe, much more confident. I could go wherever I wanted, especially after dark, come home in public transport, and I didn't feel like someone was going to hurt me. And I didn't have to put so much thought into my appearance. I always like fashion, but dressing as a man, I don't have to worry about makeup. Hair is a lot more low maintenance. And yeah, it was just basically shirt, jacket, pants, shoes. It's very simple. And no one was critical of me. I felt much more relaxed, I think. It was very freeing, and a lot of trans men or detrans girls talk about that euphoria, this kind of honeymoon period of about a year or two. We just go, I'm invisible to men. I am just so confident and strong. And, I mean, physically you're stronger as well. And you're just feeling more reckless, and you feel great all around. And suddenly detransitioning, I am aware of all of this all over again, that people are looking at me, scrutinizing me, every little aspect of me, and my God, there's so much hair removal. I think this is the patriarchy, because women cannot take over the world, because we've got to spend at least 30% of our waking hours removing every hair from our body.
Well, these are the sacrifices we have to make,
It's the thing, I'm not like, I'm a butch lesbian, fuck the patriarchy, I'm just going to let it all grow. Because I personally do like the way it feels. It's very silky smooth. But
yeah, I shave my legs from time to time, and it is very nice. I will agree with that.
It's very free. Oh, the breeze against your skin.
It's pretty good. And were there any negatives to being a man that you found? Did you ever get into any physical confrontations? Did you ever have to deal with any kind of aggression, just in yourself or with other people? Or
yeah, men were suddenly more like competition. They weren't seeing me as the goal, the prize. I was the competition. So there were. I mean, I never wanted to. Gyms are the place, I'm told, apparently there's a lot of that kind of conflict, a lot of insecure people hanging around there. But yeah, just in general, having arguments with men in a way I never did before, that was quite surprising, because as a girl, men would never, not men who've been raised properly, they would not talk to a woman that way. And then suddenly men were getting up in my face and having arguments as they would another man. Oh, this is, well, okay. I wasn't expecting that.
I think, like, yeah, I suppose that probably could be a little scary because, like, I personally, like, I don't have much of a problem with guys doing that. I quite like heated debate and stuff like that. But I do notice that when it comes to, like, when we're sitting around a table and there's girls there, like, they do really struggle to get involved. And I can't tell if it's because they just have a problem with asserting themselves or whether they actually feel intimidated just because of maybe how heated it is. Whereas, like, I never actually feel any actual anger, but I will get impassioned, if that makes sense.
I'm always getting intense debate. Love doing that. I mean, I will find the vegan at the party just so I can start debating and telling them how wrong they are, because that's my favorite hobby.
Yeah, which I think it's the spice of life personally, but like it's a lot. It's not
so conflict averse now. I think that's another problem with the internet. I love technology. I think technology is a wonderful thing. But reach exceeding grasp, we mentally, emotionally are not mature enough. And one of those things is being able to voice your opinion, but being able to shut down any contradicting opinions or any sort of discussion. So again, echo chamber is a big problem here, where
absolutely.
We're all saying, oh, you know, trans rights and let everyone transition. We should make it more convenient. A lot of these people who are retweeting this stuff have not done the research, do not know what they're saying. If you actually sat them down and showed them the research, they would probably be shocked. I've got a friend, she just recently sent me an article she was reading about how transitioning doesn't help mental health. And she was like, I love being able to talk to you because I feel like if I talk to anyone else, I'm going to be publicly executed. And we had this great long discussion and just about how we are not allowing for any room for debate or any sort of counter perspective, and that we do have scientific evidence to back us up, especially now, the detrans community. And I think we are getting to a point where we are starting to talk about it a bit more. It's the same thing with vegan versus carnivore. Once the carnivore movement really took off, suddenly people were going, wait, no, plants are actually bad too for the environment. Oh, okay. And so it's a little bit easier to have that conversation just in the past 5 years. Same thing with the detrans thing. When I detransitioned, I was just like, oh shit. You know, am I going to be disowned? Am I going to be executed? No. Well, some people did disown me.
Wow.
But primarily people were just like, hey, you do you. And if this is what makes you happy, I'm sorry you went through this. Welcome back. People were pretty positive.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Fair enough. Like, I mean, it is always dicey, isn't it? Because, like, do you... And this is one of the questions that I had in there that is kind of relevant to this point, but, like, because obviously, like you say, you had a fear of when you detransitioned, are you going to be disowned? And I have wondered, are detransitioners a little bit like apostates from a church? Like, because I'm really into religions. I grew up religious, and I'm really fascinated by ex-Muslims and ex-Mormons. I'm an ex-Mormon, and like just people who have left churches and stuff. I'm starting to.
Are you allowed to have birthdays now?
Sorry,
are you allowed to have birthdays now?
We have. That's Jehovah's Witnesses. That's Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh, I thought Mormon is.
No, we have birthdays.
I watch Book of Mormon, clearly.
But I just wondered how you were actually treated when you were in the trans community. How were you treated then? And then when you left, how were you treated?
Oh, you know, you get all this praise and attention. Oh, you're so brave. You're transitioning. You're becoming your true self. This is amazing. Congratulations. So I can see why it's seductive to people. And then when you detransition, it's just like, where'd everybody go? Oh, just got to go through this myself. Doctors even, you know, I would say I'm detransitioning. What can I expect? Have I done any long-term damage to myself? I don't know, but your appointment's over in about a minute, so if there's anything else you want to say, it's like, okay. Yeah, I was on the phone. I was doing a phone appointment with the sexual health clinic, and I said I'm detransitioning, and so at that point I was trying to get on a different kind of testosterone, but because I'm on the wait list so long, I'd stopped taking testosterone and just woken up to myself and realized, oh no, this isn't right for me at all. And that woman wanted to get off the phone with me immediately. The moment I said I'm detransed, oh, okay, bye. This is a very scary, confusing time for me. What? No, no one cares. So, yeah, I can understand why there are so many people on the detrans subreddit who come in and say, I'm questioning my gender identity, but I'm just so afraid, that I made such a huge deal about being trans. I cut my family out of my life. I did this, that, and the other. Oh, I feel like an absolute idiot. And the most difficult thing you could do is admit that you're wrong. Even scientists who have been trained to be as neutral and logical as possible, when they find that their study was wrong or whatever belief they were holding, I'd say Bill Nye was very vocal against genetically modified GMO foods.
Yeah.
And then he continued to do research because a lot of people were sending a message going, hey, read this, read that. And a few years later he came and said, well, actually, no, GMO is not as bad as I thought it was. So that takes a lot of guts. No matter what subject you're talking about, no one wants to feel like an idiot where you got into this heated debate going, no, fuck you, I'm trans, screw you, mom. And then you turn around 5 years later and go, oh, no, actually, you were right, and I was wrong. And so, sadly, I see these stories from transgender people. They're still living as trans, but they'll talk in the detrans subreddit. And they'll say, oh, I haven't enjoyed being trans for years now, but it's too late for me. It's too late. I've made the decision. Jesus, that is the saddest thing to me.
Yeah, it is a shame. And this is why I think a lot of people are worried about the current trend, because it seems like the pro-trans community are not willing to acknowledge that innocent people may be getting caught up in things that they don't...
A lot of...
Yeah, that they... And then that... For me, like, I don't know what you think about this, but do you feel that like the pro-trans community are somewhat irresponsible in the way that they go about doing things?
Yeah, because the fundamental issue is that we cannot, with any certainty, diagnose trans people. Therefore, we have to treat everyone with the same level of skepticism. I know they hate that. I know they think it's transphobic, but it's just sensible, because if everyone could just walk into a GP's clinic and say, oh, I'm trans, and I only decided I was trans yesterday, and we're not going to have any sort of mental evaluation, just here you go, here's a prescription for hormones. That is just... that doctors are not hairdressers. They're doctors.
Yeah.
That means that they're the ones who make the assessment. They're the ones who make the judgment calls here, not the patient. So it's not about making you happy, it's making you healthy and whole. Yeah. And they're not doing it. This is something where we have to be holistic. This is the most holistic aspect of our identities, is trying to make your brain match your body. That's a huge thing. And I'm even questioning whether we should be doing these things to genuine cases of trans people, because hormones will significantly increase your chances of heart attack, of cancer, of stroke. None of this I was warned of in advance. It will increase gender dysphoria. Surgeries can go horrendously wrong, especially genital surgeries. I mean, you might be pooping out of your fake vagina. You might be having to piss out of a hole in your leg. It's just, they don't warn you how horrendously wrong this can go. You might end up in a wheelchair. You might die. And you have the trans community going, no, surgery should be free and it should be available immediately. You shouldn't have to have therapy. It's like, in what reality does that sound safe, even for someone who is truly trans? It is a big lifelong commitment. For someone who is truly transgender, it's still a big freaking commitment and a life change. Yeah.
And yeah, I think that is the big worry with things. And that's what my worries come from, is that like, I want there to be a consensus on what trans is, what it means, and then we can put like safeguards around it so that we have less of this stuff going on. And obviously, yeah, more information, better information about what this journey is going to look like for you, and what are some of the the health hazards that could come along with it. Because we put, I mean, at least over here anyway, we put messages on cigarette cartons, and we even have things on junk food and stuff like that to tell us all the stuff for like the safety precautions and whatnot. And I just think yeah, why wouldn't you have that for this stuff? And it just seems like it just doesn't make a lot of sense for me right now. And I think
it would be like saying that the warnings on medication or on certain products, has not been tested safe for pregnant women. That's on so many things. Could you imagine if suddenly pregnant women were like, well, that's pregnant phobic?
I mean, it's just this.
You think you're responsible, you dickhead.
It's an irrational response, and I understand that like trans people, they feel so passionately about their rights, and they know that they feel like people just don't want to give them rights whatsoever, and like that's why they fight so passionately for it, and that's probably why they. Yeah,
I don't know what caused that to begin with, but they absolutely get off on, I mean, this is just everyone on Twitter. They want to be outraged. They want to be offended. They want you to say something that they can get angry about. And I'm seeing that even on my YouTube, where a couple of people have gone, I support your own journey, but could you not be so transphobic and claim that there aren't any real trans people? It's just like, I never said a thing of the sort. You were imagining things, or you just want to be offended. I don't know, one of the two, or both.
Yeah, people love to put stuff in your mouth, especially if you have an opinion that is slightly different to theirs, but they will try to construe it into the worst possible outcome.
And that's the thing is... It is, I think of Revenge of the Sith, where it's only a Sith Lord deals in absolutes. Yeah. You're either with us or you're against us. No, I say I'm actually quite left-leaning in terms of how I vote, how I think about the economy, environment. I am very left-wing, but when it comes to medicine and psychology, and especially in regards to gender and transgender people, we have to exercise some caution. That's not being right-wing. That's just being sensible. That's just, whoa, hold on. Let's think before we shoot here.
I think it's definitely an apolitical problem that has been politicized, unfortunately.
And it's a dangerous thing.
Yeah, and it is exactly, and it's part of the problem as to why people are talking past each other and these discussions can't happen. Because it is becoming such, like you say, it's becoming such an us and them, and it's become on political lines now. So the pro-trans movements are basically the left-wingers, and the TERFs and whatnot are at least spoken about as if they are the right-wingers, even though they are also left-wing. A lot of the radical feminists, they're like Marxists and stuff, but like... Yeah.
I actually find that the right-wing people have been the most kind and the most understanding with my detransition. They want to listen to my story, and they think it's such a tragedy, and that's quite comforting. That's really nice that someone out there who's a total stranger to me feels that way. And yet on the left, supposed left, you got these SJWs who just want me to die. So I don't know.
This is the bad guy. This is where the misconstrue, and don't get me wrong, I think there are people on the right who are definitely just hateful of LGBT things in general.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, of course they do.
There was that quote that was going around recently. I can't remember who said it, but it was, your psychology is established before your political allegiances are. So if you're an asshole, you're going to use your politics to perpetuate your douchebaggery.
Yeah.
So, if SJWs, a bunch of people who just want to be bullies. It's not about social justice. They just want to be bullies. And then right-wing, MAGA sons of bitches, they just want to be assholes. It's not even about the politics.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, those are sizable portions of each side, I would say. I don't want to say they're the majority, but they are sizable portions of each side. And But I will say that a lot of the just normal conservatives, and I'm not saying like people who are Trump supporters, just people who are conservative in nature, who happen to maybe largely fall on the right side of things, but maybe not always. But like, I think for them, their concern is not based in any kind of hatred to trans people. It is based in a worry that there's going to be undue harm done to people if people just don't acknowledge the various problems that we've outlined in this discussion.
And that's why I'm so, you know, I say yes to every interview. I make as many videos as I can. I talk about this wherever I get the opportunity, because I think the more detrans people who talk, the more it's the more difficult it is to ignore the fact that, oh wow, no, there's a lot of cases where transitioning is not the answer, and we've been ignoring those people. Or the trans community really downplays our existence. They say, oh, you know, detrans people, they're like 1% of the trans. No, I actually think the numbers are flipped, that the people who are identifying as trans, non-binary, whatever, are probably 50% above. Sometimes I feel like it's 90% at times. Where I know some people, won't name names, but there's this girl I know who... very attractive girl, very curvy, big boobs, has borderline personality disorder. Then she cuts her hair short, has this bowl cut, bright orange, gets her tits cut off, says she's a demi-boy, has hearts tattooed on her nipples. But like I was a man at the time saying, oh, so you want the deeper voice, you want the Adam's apple, all that, you know, all the great stuff that I'm enjoying. She, oh no, ew, yuck. No, but I'm a demi-boy. Like, well, what do you mean by... I could never get to the source of, well, what the hell's a demi-boy? But no, she was very adamant about that. And then about a year later, she's non-binary. Then I know what she's calling herself now, but throughout the entire experience, she was dressing as a very feminine woman. Maybe she wasn't wearing dresses, but she was makeup, heels, all of that. And... I felt so sorry for her, because I was watching on the outside going, this is a train wreck. She's clearly, it's borderline personality disorder, not gender dysphoria. I don't know how any doctor went, well, you've been struggling with this mental illness for years, but here, let's do the surgery, let's give you hormones and stuff. I don't know if she actually, no, she never did the hormones, but she did the surgery.
This is actually really important. Oh, sorry, go on. Sorry, I thought you'd finished. Sorry, no, continue.
Oh, the other thing is just people like that continually moving the goalposts of what a man is. That's the bloody confusing irony of, oh no, I'm not really a woman. I'm a demi-boy. What's a demi-boy? Well, a demi-boy can dress however they want, and I'm going to dress super girly, but I'm still a man. So why do you want to be a man if you don't want to be a man?
Well, this brings me on to something else that I was going to bring it up a little bit earlier, but we the conversation moved on, so it doesn't really matter too much.
I am derailing detrans.
No, honestly, it's been a great discussion, so don't worry about it. But there's something that I've really been trying to contend with, and I made a video about it on my channel a while ago. It's probably like a year old now, or maybe longer. About the role of certain personality disorders in manifesting trans-like symptoms, you could say. You brought up borderline personality disorder, and I would also bring up narcissistic personality, histrionic, bring up a lot of the cluster B stuff, essentially. Even schizophrenia and autism as well is somewhat related to this.
So many autistic girls are transitioning because they don't feel like real girls. And when I was growing up, so it's unclear whether I actually have real autism. My current theory, the research is spotty at best. My current theory is that autism is like it's a syndrome. I mean, it was called Asperger's syndrome. It's not called a disease. Much like chronic fatigue syndrome, another condition I suffer with. Syndromes mean that there are a cluster of symptoms that we don't understand the underlying cause. Or the cause can be numerous. So in the case of chronic fatigue, it could be corona, it could be Barmah Forest, it could be Ross River. Barmah Forest is what it did me in. So I was very normal up until the age of 11, you know, just normal outdoorsy, athletic kid, very popular. Then I turned 11 on my 11th birthday. Actually, got sick with some kind of gastro. Was just really sick for about a week, and then I just had perpetual stomach issues. All of a sudden, I had just this very paranoid, introverted personality. But of course, I was 11, so well, she's going through puberty. She's going through a goth phase. You know, you just leave her be. But no, I was sick mentally and physically. Whether that's autism or something autism-like, I don't know. But I ticked every box. I went through the experience of autism. And so I didn't feel like other girls. And I idolized a lot of male characters. And I liked cosplay. I was imagining myself as those characters. I also have hyperphantasia, so I have a very strong imagination. And I didn't realize this until recently, but I can always see myself. I'm always seeing myself in third-person perspective, and so I'm hyper aware of my physical appearance. And if I can't visualize myself properly, I'm just overwhelmed or overstimulated, or I just can't focus. I just feel like I'm floating in the void, and it's dissociation. It's this very uncomfortable, surreal feeling. And so sometimes I would like to pretend I was a different character. And I didn't know other people didn't do that. And I think a lot of autistic kids are also like that, big imagination. They like to pretend.
Yeah.
They're emotionally, they're psychologically delayed, immature. And so the idea of transitioning and being able to transform like that is exciting, is appealing. And yeah, it's no wonder that autistic girls are the ones who are the most vulnerable to this trans pandemic.
Yeah, because they've got the double whammy of being not only autistic, making them more predisposed to that kind of thing, but also being a woman and the biological aspects of, like we were talking about earlier, that a lot of girls are more predisposed to kind of giving into what's the word for it, like social trends and social norms and stuff like that. So like
they call it the male, like the male brain disease, where it's like it's extreme male brain. A lot of those stereotypical male traits taken to the extreme, and so a lot of autistic girls, they are very much like men, where they're not interested in conforming.
Yeah, true.
They're very blunt, they're not ladylike, so they start feeling social dysphoria and not having the language. No one talks about. I'm gonna freaking buy billboards around the world saying social dysphoria is the real enemy, because we don't talk about it. You go to a therapist, you go to a doctor and say, well, I don't feel like other girls. No therapist says, well, hold up. Is it because you physically want a penis, or is it because you don't like the way boys look at you? And if it's because you don't like the way boys look at you, well, let's keep talking. Because that's the other thing. I never had genital dysphoria, sort of, maybe, because I was asexual, so I wasn't thinking about it. And yeah, never thought about my genitals, really wasn't an issue. Some people do have genital dysphoria, but the ones who don't, I think they're the biggest red flag. They're not trans. They just don't like the way that they're treated as their particular gender. And also there's just a lot of confusion about sexuality. So, yeah, I am a lesbian, looking at the lesbian community, and just the discussions about penetration are fascinating, because a lot of, especially now, women around my age were growing up as lesbians going, well, I like the idea of doing penetrating. Does that mean I'm a trans man? And well, if you go on the internet and have your doubts, strangers will say, yeah, you're definitely trans. You got to transition. So there's a lot of lesbians who are now, a lot of detrans women are lesbians, but there are a lot of lesbians who are just so confused right now and don't feel like they have space for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine there's a lot of lesbians out there who, yeah, like you say, because it seems like trans people are trying to shoehorn themselves into, like, well, trans women, I should say, are trying to shoehorn themselves into the lesbian movement, and it seems like there's a lot of lesbians out there who are a bit like, whoa, hold up. Like, I think is fair enough, personally, but, like...
yeah, I mean, for me, as a lesbian, I go on these lesbian dating apps, and it's just like all these trans women are going, well, I'm not interested in your bits, I'm sorry, but like I'm gay, so I'm looking for a vagina. It's just how that's just how this works. It's not transphobic. It's just about biology.
Yeah, and I don't know, again, this is where, like, the theory meets reality kind of a situation, and things start to break down. Like, I think like a lot of the trans activists and stuff, they have really unrealistic expectations of what other people are going to put up with. And
when it comes to dating, that is the most personal, private thing ever. You might be the most tolerant person on earth. I felt this too, just getting into the dating scene for the first time in my life, just going, oh my God, I'm such a narcissist, and I'm such a, I'm so shallow, and because you suddenly, when it comes to dating, it is about compatibility. It is about appearance. It does sadly become a very shallow, judgmental thing because, well, that's your sex life. You can't just be open to whatever if you're not actually into it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think everyone has a right to have their preferences in that, whatever that manifests. Like, that's up to them, and it is part of our personal freedom that you just can't take away. So, like, with people trying to advocate for, like, oh, you can't, if you're not attracted to trans women or whatever, then you're a transphobe and all this stuff. I just think you're just shooting yourselves in the foot, because you're making yourselves look even more unreasonable. And more cis people are not going to come to your cause, and this is going to hamper your ability to get trans rights for yourselves, because people are just not going to take you seriously. And also,
that they say that gender doesn't matter, that gender is a social construct, that it's just not important at all, and yet they're super, super obsessed over gender more than cis people in terms of, you can't just be butch, you can't just be femme, you're non-binary, or you must be trans, and you must want to take hormones and do all this other stuff. If we all just calmed down and really believed that gender didn't matter, then yeah, men can walk around in skirts and women can shave their heads, and it doesn't matter. That's the biggest problem. We're talking about fish and all that being able to change their gender roles. We can't do that, not biologically, but we can do that socially. And I think that's the thing I've really honed in on in the past few weeks, is just, oh yeah, why don't we just chill the fuck out, and everyone can dress however they want, and we don't have to put labels on anything, and everything would be nice again.
I mean, I think, like, for me, I don't know how far that can go, because I agree, like, there is a goal to be had where finding some kind of equilibrium where masculinity doesn't have to be so rigid, femininity doesn't have to be so rigid. Like, that is something to aspire to. But I also feel like there's something about it that is inescapable at the same time. Like, you're never, as a man, you're never going to be able to fully escape the biological necessity of what it means to be a man. And the same for women as well. Like, it's not. And as much as I'd love to create wiggle room there for what all those things mean, I think to completely erase it is probably impossible, unless you did some kind of, like, crazy Brave New World, like, completely. Yeah. So,
we need to accept our biology. The moment I started accepting my biology, all my issues went away. I was going to the therapist I was actually freaking paying money for. I want a refund. I want to sue her, actually.
Get the receipts.
She was affirming my male robot persona, and I was getting worse and worse. I actually got considerably worse after she was telling me this. Sorry, and the moment I just went, look, you're just a human, you're just a woman, and those are pretty cool things if you think about it. If you're familiar with Watchmen, there's this epiphany that Dr. Manhattan has where throughout the whole book he's just, humans, waste of space, was insignificant, unremarkable, and then at a certain point, long story, he finally goes, oh, actually, no, humans are actually quite remarkable, and just the fact that you, Laurie, the specific woman I'm standing in front of, came into existence at all. Wow, how profound, how amazing. And when I just sort of woke up and started thinking of things from that perspective of, wow, I've got a pretty good body, actually. And everyone was always complimenting it or jealous of it or whatever, and then I threw that all away. Why? Why did I do that? So affirmation therapy has to stop. Affirmation therapy is like the last leg of that journey. You need to be critical. You need Jungian psychology is something I'm quite a big fan of, where you really need to analyze and interrogate the what do you call it, the shadow self, the inner self. I had never done any of that when I transitioned. I did not know myself at all. I thought I did, because everyone thinks they know themselves, but I was an idiot. I probably still don't know myself. But yeah, until I really, really had a good hard look at myself, I was not able to make a decision, and I don't think anyone else can either.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I think these, especially Jungian psychology and stuff like that, and symbology in general, I think it can tell us a lot about our own psyche and our own motivations for doing things. I think, like, yeah, I'd like to see a little bit more of that come into the therapy aspect, because I do think there needs to be a bit of pushback. So, like you say, when they're just reaffirming just your belief. Like, so say, for instance, you didn't come in with gender dysphoria. Say you came in with something else. Say you came in like, I believe I'm Jesus Christ, or I believe I'm
a robot.
Yeah, or and then they suddenly go, oh, that's very interesting. So what miracles did you do today? Like, it's like, why would you reaffirm something that is clearly giving them a false sense of self? Like,
it would be like talking about schizophrenic, and that was almost and affirming their delusions. And that was kind of what was happening with me, where every time I was going to that therapist, I came out further and further up my own ass in my own delusions. In terms of, I don't know why some commenters say that I'm classy, because I just wear like a sailor. But
I think it's because you've got that 80s Tory look about you.
So I had this kind of Space Odyssey, 2001: A Space Odyssey idea of, oh, well, my AI is inside of me. It's like how, you see. And so there was this, he ascended and he was like, came across dimensions, and then his consciousness ended up in mine, and that's why he's living inside of me. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's what the therapist said. Instead, she's like, that'll be $70.
Right, wow, that's a racket, that, isn't it? Like, literally just sat there to agree with you for money rather than to actually do a job.
Yeah, she would either just say, oh, you should immerse yourself in more robot media, and so how did you become Connor, and where does Connor come from? And when I said, oh, from an alternate dimension, she wasn't like, maybe you shouldn't think that way.
Yeah, it's mental, because like back in the day you'd be committed for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, not to say that that's necessarily right, but I'm just saying that, like, it's come like full swing round.
And no one, I think my mum got to a point where she just went, I don't know what to do. I've tried to stop you, but I guess, my daughter is being taken over by Connor, the AI from an alternate dimension. All right. And my friends, when I came out as being a robot, if that makes sense for you and that makes you comfortable, then no! Someone stop me, please! Put me in the white padded cell. This is not okay. Yeah, it was a cry for help, and no one listened.
Well, I honestly do think there's something very interesting there. Like, I do think when you've mentioned that it being something along the lines of like a disassociative thing, and with my armchair psychology degree, I will say that it did. I don't know if you're... What was that? Sorry.
Your game of chair psychology, yeah,
absolutely. And I do think, like, that's one thing that came up for me when I first listened to your video. I did instantly think, like, is there some kind of depersonalization kind of thing going on here? Because, to be so disassociated from your own body that you think you're a robot. Like, that's like another level. That's not even just third person. That's like completely disassociating from humanity completely. So it's like, I did wonder about that. And then you mentioned it yourself. So I assume that's kind of, rummaging around in your mind, like how. Oh, sorry. Have you not got a lot of time?
No, just really. No, it's just like I'm gonna hold. I have a baby bladder, so I'm gonna run. I'm gonna come back, and then we'll talk.
Oh yeah, no problem. I'll make a cigarette. Sorry, I'm just making a cigarette.
So yeah, Connor. I don't know what triggered it specifically. I just remember. I think I talked about this in my video where I was actually staying over at a friend's house and just watching movies, and then that night I thought, yeah, I think I'm trans. No, I did. Why? What caused it? Came out of the blue. And I mean, some of it doesn't come out. I had this fascination with strength and power and dominance, and yeah, I'm very much that way inclined.
Okay.
And yeah. Oh, are we still recording? Or?
Yeah, no, we're still recording. Sorry, I was just making.
You were doing that, like, oh, we're on break here.
No, I'm an open smoker on my streams. Don't smoke, kids.
Yeah.
Sorry, just 1 second. I'm just looking for a little lighter.
Okay.
I thought I had one here. Damn it! Oh, this is so unprofessional. I'm sorry, guys. Oh my god! I think my girlfriend's stolen my lighter. Give me 1 second.
All right.
Oh no. Whew. There we go. Sorry about that, guys. I thought my girlfriend stole my lighter and she's also left the house. So I had to run around and find one really quick. So sorry about that. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, so just over the years, Connor took on a more and more defined personality, and he was very different from me. So yeah, he detached from, well, not even detached. He did not have an emotional connection with my friends or family because they weren't his friends or family. And so he had to learn that all over again. And as time went by, his personality diverged from my own in terms of being submissive, of wanting to serve humans. That's the thing, I didn't hate humans, or Connor didn't hate humans. It depends how you want to define it. I think it's easy to just call him Connor. Yeah, Connor didn't hate humans. He wanted a human master. He wanted... he was always very concerned about the well-being of other human beings, and yeah, he was basically what you would expect an AI to behave like, and he wasn't that interested in other machines, which is the weird thing. So I am very much interested in machines, cars, all of that. He wasn't, because his primary focus was looking after humans. Other machines are, well, just there to do the same kind of job, so they weren't a concern for him. And then all of a sudden, just one night, again, just watching a movie. I was watching Underwater with Kristen Stewart, actually, and I think maybe a part of that was I was watching her going, oh, she's got the shaved head, but she looks feminine. Yeah, why didn't I just do that? And all of a sudden I went, oh God, why didn't I just do that? Oh my God, what have I done? And so I started to wake up at that point. And that was a really confusing period because I didn't realize just how much we were different personalities. So there was a period there for the past, I don't know, since October last year, just switching back and forth between our identities. And only this morning did we actually have a conversation with each other. Most of the time, oh no, we had an argument actually the other week. I was talking to one of his friends that he was very close to her. They made friends. I hadn't really known her. And then I had an argument with her, and then it was like this conflict between me and Connor, and then I blacked out, so I don't really know what happened there. But yeah, whatever this is, maybe it is proper DID, I don't know, but apparently people with proper DID black out every time. They don't have an awareness.
That's really interesting. And like,
and I could very clearly see, well, Connor could very clearly see what he looked like. And I have drawn what he looks like. I throw that in my video sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah, just every little detail, he knew what he was supposed to look like. And then when he looked in the mirror, that didn't match. But because, and he, obviously, AI, Asimov's laws, cause no harm. He didn't want to interfere with me for a long time. Then I didn't come back. So about a year or so later, he went, okay, well, I guess this is my body. I'm a human now. I will customize it to look how I want. Being a male android, he went, well, I want to be a human male because that's as close as I get. And then having this delusion that technology would suddenly rapidly advance, that I could start cutting off limbs and all. Thank God we don't live in like Deus Ex or something, because I would be missing most, if not all, of my limbs now. I would have robot limbs.
That's the dream, baby.
And, yeah. And where is the end goal? I think that was the thing that Connor became obsessed with was, okay, you remove this part and you replace this part and you keep going. When are you actually satisfied? Because an android, an AI, has the computational abilities far beyond anything a human could ever possibly hope to achieve, even with cybernetic implants. It's just, if you were made in a factory, your life will never be that of someone who was born and raised by humans. It's just, there is the fundamental difference there. And I don't know, I just eventually got to this breaking point. And I should say that there were, like, I would have these sort of, Connor would have these kind of panic attacks or whatever, just feeling really claustrophobic and disgusted with the body. Just the sound of breathing or swallowing, it was just profoundly disturbing. And that just got worse and worse and worse until, yeah, there was just this snapping point, and I woke up again, and things have been becoming more normal ever since.
Okay.
Oh, hello.
So, I like you say, I mean, this kind of comes back to the argument then that, like, therapy and trying to discern the motivations, whether they're coming from like a personality disorder perspective, or autism, or even just getting caught in a trend and stuff like that, they need to be rooted out somehow, because in order to be able to catch this stuff, because obviously this therapy where it's just gender, it's just affirming, isn't working, because that's literally just driving more people into it without really discovering themselves, and then obviously people are making mistakes and it's causing undue harm to people.
Oh, the moment you say, I think I might be trans, game over, man. The moment you bring up trans to a doctor or a therapist, they're immediately going to affirm. They're not going to go, well, actually, to my original GP's credit, he went, no, I don't think you are. You've never presented symptoms. I think we should slow down. And I was just like, screw you. And then I got another GP who did affirm my delusions. And, well, it was all downhill from there. So, yeah, I will actually give that guy credit. He was right. And I wish there were more doctors like him.
Yeah, I think we need a bit more of that as well. Like, I just think, just for everybody's safety in mind, I think it's got to be imperative to the situation. Otherwise, like you say, we're going to get lost down this rabbit hole where I'm not sure if there's any coming back from it. And so, yeah, I think it's really valuable to, just get this out in the open a little bit. So this is one thing I wanted to talk about. So we're going to take a little bit of a divergence here. But I wanted to get your take on some of the celebrity transitions that have happened recently. So, Ellen Page now has transitioned, and there was Philosophy Tube, and I can't think of... There's been a couple of others, but I can't think off the top of my head.
Philosophy Tube was surprising because, he had facial hair, he was always, presenting as masculine. There was never this slow transitional phase of, maybe I'll just let my hair grow out or I'll shave my beard. It just went from 0 to 60. Just, Jesus.
Yeah, and I wonder, for me, and this is just my perspective, but I always find a little bit of a red flag when somebody over the age of 30 decides to transition. I always, especially when there's been no prior history of it. That's... Oh,
Caitlyn was the name we were trying to remember before.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Caitlyn's a bit different because she actually says that her entire life she's had this, right? So, and it's been behind closed doors and stuff like that. So if that is the case, that's true.
I think she seems a legitimate case to me. But, Elliot Page? I don't know. I very much question this because she has, again, didn't change her appearance at all. Has she even cut her hair now? I've been looking for photos, and I think she's still...
I think she has. I saw a picture not long ago where she honestly doesn't look that different. She's just wearing a blazer and a hat now, and she's cut her hair. I'm just like, you just look like a tomboy.
And she wasn't even a butch. She was never a butch lesbian. She was never in that extreme. She's just kind of somewhere in the middle. And okay, so she's an actress, so there's certain pressures. She was probably risking her career if she transitioned, but it's something about that particular case just doesn't seem right to me because real trans cases, it's like Gator, this trans radar. You can kind of tell, this person transitioning doesn't surprise me. And for her to do, especially because she has been so vocal about being a lesbian community and all of that, and then to suddenly say, well, no, that's not enough. It's not enough to be a lesbian. I actually have to be a man. Why? I don't get that.
I kind of chalked it up, and obviously I don't know the ins and outs of her life, so I could be way off base. But my first instinct with it was that it seemed like another way to come out and gain attention. So when she first came out as lesbian, it was this big thing where everybody loved her for coming out, and it was this big hoo-ha and a big deal. And I think she wanted to re-experience,
recapture
that thing. And she was like, well, I can't come out as lesbian again, so I'll have to come out as trans now, and then everybody will love me again. And it's that's what made me feel like it was a narcissistic response rather than a legitimate dysphoric response.
It's really hard to say one way or the other about celebrities. We don't know them personally, but I agree with you that just something about it is not feeling right. And especially at Philosophy Tube, again, just going from nothing to achieving speeds of transition that would make a Bugatti Veyron jealous. Just the speed in which he transitioned was ridiculous. It was just okay, now all right.
Did you watch the video? Her coming out video?
I started to watch it. I never actually got around to watching it, but people kept sending me links what do you think of this? I don't know, who is this?
It was interesting, and for me, I thought it was a narcissistic response because the way in which it was orchestrated, that video, it felt very grandiose and very self-indulgent.
Yes.
And
that was the other thing too. Is why didn't you just keep making videos without pulling attention to yourself? Because so I'm a podcaster. In the Movies by Minute community, I did Prometheus by Minute, all while I was transitioning, and then I detransitioned. And I basically just told my audience, because I just changed my name in the introduction. I said, I'm your host, Courtney Coulson, and then it was, I'm your host, Courtney Coulson. And I basically just had one line at the end of an episode saying, oh, by the way, I've decided to detransition. That was it. Whereas I think now it's, the image that pops in my head is in the Pocahontas movie, I think his name is Ratcliffe, or the villain, where he's climbing down the stairs and he's got this golden cloak around him and he's just like being fat. That's what people do when they come out as trans now, where it's just like, look at me, I'm one of you.
Yeah.
It is very self-aggrandizing.
I think the thing that really put the nail in the coffin for me was that there was two not response videos, but like two follow-up videos that Philosophy Tube did, where again it was this very you could see the excitement in her face when she's coming in to speak about it, like, and don't get me wrong, I suppose there is some excitement with, I'm on this new thing and blah blah blah, but like I don't know, there was just an underlying current to it.
Quality.
Yeah,
I think there's a fetishistic quality to both Ellen Page and Philosophy Tube transitioning, where something doesn't feel right and it's too celebratory and self-congratulatory. Whereas when I transitioned, I went in with this attitude of, this is my life. I'm not going to draw attention to it. I never spoke about being trans online, or really, like, my housemates didn't know I was trans. Most people did not know I was transgender unless they knew me beforehand. I was just so content to just, keep my head down, live my life. It's no one else's business. I couldn't imagine making a video where it's just like, hey, everybody, I'm transitioning now. I think if I had been a YouTuber at the time, I mean, I was a podcaster, but obviously there's no visual aspect. As I was transitioning, didn't say anything about it. It wasn't anyone else's business.
Yeah, and it wasn't important to the podcast or anything like that. And
my podcast is about reviewing Ridley Scott movies, so... and it's the same thing. Philosophy Tube is not about transsexuality. It's about philosophy. So,
or at least it's supposed to be. But
it's supposed to be, yeah. Like if ContraPoints, her whole brand is being a trans woman, so that's expected, I guess.
But it wasn't originally. Like she wasn't obviously trans at the start of her YouTube career. And yeah, she transitioned over time, but like I think I don't really have a lot to say about ContraPoints other than I think like a lot of her positions are a bit not.
It's very hard for me to even follow what she says. She talks in sort of this like there's sarcasm, and then there's double sarcasm, and then there's double entendre, and I just go, what is the point you're actually trying to make? Because it sounds like you're saying two things at once here. I have no idea what she says.
A lot of her stuff is so convoluted and I think it's very purposefully done so, just to make it difficult to argue against her, really, or to see, or to pick flaws in her arguments. But at the same time, in being that convoluted, it ends up being that you can actually pick it apart quite easily anyway. So
yeah, say everything, you end up saying nothing.
Yeah, to a certain degree, yeah. So yeah, I don't know, like, but her whole story was a little less like a coming out party than others. However, her celebration of being trans and her focal point on that topic, I guess you could construe it as self-aggrandizing, because when you watch her videos, everything's so fantastic and over the top and whatever. Like, you could ascribe some level of narcissistic response to it if you wanted to, but I don't know if that's the case with her.
I think, as a trans medicalist, I think being transgender is an illness. We don't really understand what's going on here. There's some evidence that maybe it's exposure to the particular levels of testosterone exposure in the womb, or
I think that's a good shout, personally.
Yeah, and I think that, we should be treating it like a medical condition, because that's the thing is, being gay is not a medical condition, because I don't have to change anything about myself with scientific advancements to live my life as a lesbian. I can just be a lesbian and that's it. But to be a trans woman or a trans man, you have to cut off bits, you got to add bits, you got to take hormones, that's not natural. So obviously it's an illness, and transgender trans medicalists will agree with that. And it shouldn't be celebrated. It should be a very serious decision of, well, I've decided to go through this. It should be, I don't know what you would compare it to, but yeah, just having to go through these procedures, it should be taken with a level of, wow, I'm sorry that you feel like you have to do this. That's really tragic. That's sad that you have to mutilate your body and take these risks. It can be fatal. I think that's the attitude you should have, and that's the attitude I always had about my own transition. Is, it's really fucked that I have to do this. What I thought was the rest of my life.
Yeah, I think that's the problem that we run into when it comes to the pro-trans movement, is that they get very callous with it, and they
make it all so fun and glitzy and exciting and put rainbows on everything, and you'll be free and liberate. There's a lot of cult tactics being used.
And then obviously because of that, those people who would hijack the movement, it makes it easier for them. Like those people that would want to come at this from a narcissistic response, where they want to feel special, they want to feel like they're getting the social praise, and they don't want to miss out on it, so I'm going to be trans now. And that kind of thing, like those people do hijack these movements, and they do take... And I guess in a certain respect, like they would be advocates for the self-ID kind of worldview, because it benefits them the most, because they can get all the benefits with the minimal amount of work, essentially.
Yeah, and we're at a point now where you cannot criticize the trans community at all, and we're not supposed to be disgusted by the idea of a trans man wanting to get pregnant, or that a mother would force her son to transition into a girl because she wanted a daughter. We're not supposed to be critical of that.
Yeah, there just has to be room for people to be realistic. And there has to be skepticism, because otherwise, like I say, it makes the movement very vulnerable to lots of different things. And it also... the
fact that they pretend that there's no downside. So the whole trans male pregnancy, they go, oh no, you can just stop taking hormones and you can fall pregnant, easy, no problem. Not true. And there won't be any harm on your baby, because if you stop taking testosterone, it's out of your system. No, also not true. We don't know harms of taking testosterone and then falling pregnant. We also don't know how long that stays in your system. So I stopped taking testosterone, and this is a low dose. I stopped taking it in October, and it's, March now? I'm still seeing changes. My waist is becoming narrower. I've still got facial hair, but it's thinning. So if I had fallen pregnant at some point in that period of time, which is what some trans men do, I have no idea what that would be doing to my kid. So they pretend that there's no risk, but we don't know.
Yeah. And it's just, I don't know, it's just a shame that it's gotten to this point where their fervent belief it's just hindering everything, in my opinion. It's just completely hindering all progress that can be made on this topic. And I don't know what the future's going to be for it, because it seems like they actually have gained the most ground, generally speaking. My perception could be completely off here. Maybe it's just internet politics that's making me feel this way.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we're looking at policymakers and doctors and stuff, and they are all being pressured by the trans community. I was reading something that real endocrinologists didn't even get a say in a lot of these transsexual policies. They only consulted actual trans people. And again, you kind of need to consult experts, especially when you're making policies. And I think it really does come down to, ironically, I think it's a good thing that we live in a more empathetic, understanding time. I think, generally speaking, we are more open and accepting of people's differences, and legalization of gay marriage, or just apparently bullying is going down, and violence in general, crime in general, is going down.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we are in a more empathetic time. But it's gotten to the point now when, oh, well, you don't want to seem like the asshole. We want to be polite and accepting. So politicians, doctors, they're more easily swayed. These trans people say, oh, well, we'll kill ourselves if you don't let us transition, and it's really serious. And, well, okay, you're not the expert here. And, yeah, it turns out suicide rates for transgender people about the same for those who have transitioned and for those who have not transitioned. So
yeah. So again, like, if you're going to look at the data, it will. And again, this is just coming from a truth perspective. But if you want to really get to the truth and help trans people, then we've got to acknowledge that, right? We've got to acknowledge that. And if you don't acknowledge that, in my view, you're actually harming trans people, really. Like,
Oh my god! If you look on the detrans, even sometimes on the trans forums, just some absolutely heartbreaking stories of people who just feel like, what have I done to myself? I can't undo this. And I was convinced by everyone around. Everyone was cheering me on, telling me this was the right choice. And now I want to die. People just, they feel like that's the only solution. They have to kill themselves. And yeah, I think it's a lot easier to change the mind than to change the body. I know it seems impossible, and some people will obviously deal with depression and anxiety for the rest of their lives. But I think when it comes to gender dysphoria, everything I've read from experts who worked in this field, dealing with children with gender dysphoria, these two, before the whole affirmation thing happened, they were allowed to be a bit more critical with these kids, and a lot of them just outgrew it because questioning your gender is a normal part of growing up. We all imagine what it'd be. Kids from one week to the next, different career that they want when they grow up. They pretend they're a robot or a dinosaur or a tiger, and we're expecting these little kids to know what they want to do for the rest. If you ask a 5-year-old kid, okay, so do you want to be a boy or do you want to remain a girl and then one day make babies? Like, a 5-year-old girl is not going to say, oh, no, I definitely want to have children one day.
Well, I mean, you'd probably be surprised. I mean, a lot of little girls do want to have kids, even at that age.
Oh, but there are so many women who are just like, no, I hate kids, no kids. And then all of a sudden they turn about 25 to 30 and like, biological clock's ticking, I need kids.
Yeah. Again, like, that to me is just another denial of biology, and that's not specific to the trans thing. That's just this idea that women or even men could ever really deny their actual biology. I think.
You ask really little kids, like, you ask a little boy, so do you like girls? Like, girls are gross and they stink. Yeah. Well, I guess he's gay then. Let's start setting him up for that.
And then when it comes to 15, they're like, oh my god, girls won't speak to me. I love them so much.
That's the same thing. It would be that's the same logic we're applying to trans kids. It's crazy, and they've made this false sense of pressure that, well, kids who are put on puberty blockers, when they do transition, they look so much more like the sex that they want to look like. And yes, that's true. But again, how do we know who really needed to go to that extreme? And that it's an extreme. I really want to emphasize that it's not conversion therapy. It's just weighing up your options. And, if you had told... Well, actually, no, even back then, when I was transitioning, I was thinking, it'd be nice if you could cure my brain. I would love it if you could cure my brain, but everyone told me you can't do that. So I started fixating on changing the body. So you can, I guess, reverse conversion therapy, brainwash people into thinking that they're trans, into hating their bodies, and thinking that the brain can never be changed. So that's where it's a hugely complicated issue, and affirmation is not the answer. We do really, really need to screen these people.
But, I mean, even in that way of... Because, like you say, there is some level of brainwashing on people to think that it is all okay and that you should go in this direction. But that also kind of affirms that you can actually change people's minds and actually do things to them. Like the minds can actually change, because if you can brainwash someone into thinking that they want to become trans, then you can go the other way. And
well, let me go down the whole of what is reality, of what is truth, but I think what it comes down to is what makes someone happy and comfortable, and we need to figure out a way of knowing what therapy is appropriate for what person. Because right now we're doing this one-size-fits-all approach, and we're really harming people. And there are so many cases where I go, this could have been avoided. The cases where, like the people with borderline personality disorder, I would not transition someone who had that condition unless it was really, really clear that was the case. If someone says, "Oh, I'm a demi boy and I want to remove my tits," well, hold up here, because he might switch personalities in a couple of months to a year and really regret that.
Yeah, there's definitely got to be more of a process, and there's definitely got to be more distinctions made, I think. And I think that is definitely the way forward from my perspective, like figuring out, I don't know exactly what it'll look like, but figuring out some kind of way to test people for various things. So
addressing social dysphoria. If a kid goes to a therapist and says, I think I'm transgender, I think the first approach is exploring, well, is this biological? Do you hate your biological sex, or do you hate the social role that you've been assigned? And then you work on that, and then you delve further. Don't even talk about hormones and surgery. The problem is all these kids go rushing in saying, I need it right now, give me hormones. And no, hold up, steady on. Let's really think about this. And, I was in my 20s, but I was autistic, or at least had something like autism. So that should have been a red flag. They didn't acknowledge that. And yeah, I just wish there was some, like a blood test or an MRI or whatever. Yeah, this is a trans brain. It's a cisgender brain, but you can't do that.
I mean, I don't know, maybe you could check for hormone levels or something and see if that plays a part.
They check to make sure that you don't have some sort of like PCOS or something that's causing you to be outside of the normal range of hormones for your gender. And the PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, if you're not aware, that actually can cause gender dysphoria because it causes hormonal imbalances and all of that. So there can be biological factors. I mean, this is the story of my freaking life, because autism can't be tested for, really. Chronic fatigue syndrome cannot be tested for. We can observe these things, and those things seem very real to me. But there's no way to conclusively say, yes, this is autism, this is chronic fatigue syndrome, this is transsexuality. It's frustrating.
Yeah, it is. It is a little frustrating. I think when it comes down to it, like you say, if you have been prior diagnosed with autism, then maybe, like you say, there should be more leeway for the doctors and stuff like that to be able to say, okay, well, this might be related to this, and that, just start connecting the dots and formulating a road for therapy that doesn't necessarily always include going to that.
I don't think therapists and doctors are aware right now that there are people who are susceptible to rapid onset gender dysphoria. And I think we need more research into rapid onset gender dysphoria. And I think doctors do need to be, specialists need to become aware that, okay, so if they're autistic, if they have borderline personality disorder, if they have a history of any of these particular things, they're sort of high risk of being misdiagnosed.
Yeah.
So you have to treat them in a particular way.
Yeah.
Whereas I was actually wondering, maybe you could have someone who really is trans and has felt trans their whole life, could they maybe have letters of support from friends or family? Something that proves that, this hasn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah, like someone vouching for them, so to show that their behaviour has been a kind of a constant thing. I think that would be really, really beneficial. I mean, obviously, there's still ways for people to abuse it. They could just say, "Oh, mum, just say this," and fair enough. Yeah. You're never going to be able to weed out every last flaw in a system
until we have some kind of test, like a medical test that can 100% prove if someone's trans or not. We have to get more I don't know, just smarter about and more creative with how we really define. We weed out the false cases because right now, in some states in America, a 13-year-old kid without the consenting their parents can walk into an on-campus doctor's office. Apparently, some high schools have an on-campus medical area. Yeah, you can start getting testosterone shots.
Wow. In school.
In school. And yeah, college campuses do it as well. And that's even trickier because, well, they're over the age of 18, so they really don't have to consult their parents. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how we got this way.
Yeah, like I say, I think none of us necessarily know all the answers particularly, but I do think that, like, I feel like what we're talking about is a more sensible way of approaching the situation, and I just hope more people can be open and responsive to that, because that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to find a roadmap for legitimate trans people to have their needs met, but we're also trying to make sure that people aren't hurt in the process that don't need to be.
Yeah, because I think you've got, on the one extreme, you've got people who think that being trans is amazing and wonderful, and you don't even have to have gender dysphoria to be transgender. They think you should just be able to walk into a doctor's office and immediately get access to surgery and hormones, and maybe not even have to pay for those things. And I don't know why no one's... What do you call it? What's the word? Yeah, no one's critical of that for whatever reason. Within their own little echo chamber, no one goes, really though? And on the other extreme end, they go, well, no one's really trans, and it's all in their head, and no one should transition. And I think that's probably, yeah, that neither of those perspectives are true. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, where we've always had transgender people, but it was a very, very small minority. Those who transitioned their lives seem to improve after doing so. But nowadays, we're getting so many detransitioners. You didn't so let's say around the time of, like Buck Angel and, can't remember his name, Boys Don't Cry. But yeah.
I know who you mean, the lead singer of The Cure.
No. So there was a story about a true story about the trans man who was murdered, and I can't remember the actress's name, but she played him. I
don't know this.
Oh yeah, so there's a movie called Boys Don't Cry, and what is her name? I'm almost $1 Million Baby, whatever it was.
Oh, now it's going to be on the tip of my tongue as well.
It's been a while, so yeah. Anyway, she played this real life trans man, and his story is fascinating and quite sad. But yeah, looking at that culture, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, very different trans community where they were extremely rare. No one knew about it. And those who wanted to transition they really had to pursue it. And it's not like they killed themselves because it took too long. If anything, it actually gave them hope because they're on these waiting lists, or they were, going through these long processes of evaluation. And I think the way we used to do this stuff was actually a lot better. I really do.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I think there's leeway to say that, like, maybe some of those stricter components could have been stripped back a little bit. But, like, I do think, like, they've gone too far the other way. Like, they've gone to the point now where it's like, as long as they've just said that they want to be trans and we've done a couple of meetings about it, now we can just move forward with the process and whatever. Like, I think, it's like anything in life. There has to be some level of a middle ground, some level of a balance, and I think that's what a lot of people are just searching for right now. But there's just not a lot of helpful dialogue about it.
No.
So
other than when I look at the detrans community, and because let's say for example Joe Rogan or something like that, a very mainstream site or what do you call it? podcast, or like entertainment platform, I was supposed to say. Any sources you can get that are just mainstream discussion. There we go. They're not experts, so they might have their hearts in the right place, but they don't have the facts to back it up. So then people who are already, very for allowing transition to be easier will be like, oh, well, that's lies, that's bullshit. So one example I can think of is on Joe Rogan. They're talking about the puberty blockers, and they're talking about how dangerous it was. And I was trans at the time, listening to it, going, well, they don't know what they're talking about. Oh, complete idiots. No, it's completely safe. I've been told that. I'd never actually done any research. I had just been told that it was safe. And then you've got Joe Rogan, who doesn't. Well, he gets Jamie to quickly Google things.
Yeah.
Not doing any real fact checking, and then he's perpetuating another idea without actually being able to back it up. And that's a huge issue again with the internet, that everyone has an opinion, but very few people are actually experts, people who can actually back this up.
Yeah. It is a problem because nobody wants to do the work. Nobody wants to sit there for hours reading studies. Nobody wants to do those things to try and get to the truth. And people, again, like you say, will end up just voting on policy based on little bits and pieces of information, or even just myth, essentially.
What I would really love is for academic papers to be freely available. This is something that this is a huge
go
issue.
Off, sis, go off.
Yeah. Oh my God. It is this absolute monopoly. These particular academic scientific journals are charging hundreds of dollars, or even just to get access to one paper, you have to pay like $40.
Yes.
And that's disgusting, because science information should be available to everyone. This is stuff that affects everyone's life. And we are controlling the flow of information. I thought, Martin Luther kind of did something about that centuries ago, that we should have free access to important information. So yeah, that's my big issue, and I would love that to be fixed. There is a bit of a movement now, though, that researchers are saying, oh, by the way, here's my email. If you want my paper, I don't profit from this big academic journal. So if you want my research, I'll send it to you. I actually like the fact that you're using my research. Yeah. And I would love for us to kind of fight against the establishment, the system as it is, because when it comes to, things like climate change, diet, transsexuality, we're all screaming at each other, but very few people have access to the proper information. My mum is the worst for this, where I'll explain to her over and over again, okay, carnivore is really good. This is how human beings evolved. I give her all these reasons why a meat-based diet is really good for humans. And then she'll turn around the next week and say, oh, by the way, I saw in The Project, which is this really bad news program in Australia. Yeah, I saw in The Project that there was like 35 new studies that you need plants, or that a meat-based diet will cause cancer. I'm just like, did I explain nothing about, how studies are done, who's paying for this shit? You cannot get through to some people. But at least if we made it available, maybe there'd be a chance.
Yeah, it would make things a little bit simpler. There's been plenty of times where I'm trying to do research on like various different topics to do with. I'm really interested in psychology and stuff like that. And when you're trying to find like just various different studies, sometimes even studies that are linked in articles and stuff like that, you'll click on the link to take you to the study, and literally like you can read the very small abstract. And then it'll say you have to pay £60 to read this, and it's just like, what? Wait a minute! Like, I can't even read the conclusions or anything. I can't read any of the methodology. I can't read any of how many people were actually even involved in the study. Like, I don't know what the sample size was. Like, I have no clue of any of the details. All I have to do is go off what this article says about it. And this article has every reason to completely skew what the message of this study is. just based on the fact that every news outlet has an agenda. So
yeah, that's how vegans get. That's how they got as far as they have, because a lot of these articles, they're just reading the conclusion, if that's available, or just what the study was about. And a lot of it is observational. So in the case of meat-based diets, are not dangerous in any way, but they might seem that way because of observational surveys. Basically, they ask people, how many times a week do you eat this, that, and the other? And people can lie, people can misremember, and every single study a vegan throws at me is observational. It is a study, like a survey. And when it comes to the transgender studies, actually, the biggest issue is just that trans lobbyists, I guess, trans advocates have intervened, and they've really skewed the data the wrong way, and some of these studies have had to be thrown out. But I think there may be cases of... I haven't actually encountered with trans studies if there were just surveys, but it wouldn't surprise me if there were, and if people were lying or just exaggerating how good they felt after transitioning. So these are all the things that a layperson who has not been to university would not know to look for. They would just say, well, people did this very important study and it's written in a way that I don't understand and it seems very serious, and so they must know what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's the perception, yeah. There's no... For some people, they don't realise that studies can be done with an agenda in mind already. Like, they're trying to prove a hypothesis. They don't have a hypothesis, and then whatever the results are. They're actually trying to prove a bias that they already have, and a lot of studies go about doing
science almost like a religion, where they think, oh well, science is absolute, and you've done this test, therefore it must be true. And it's just like, no, we're humans bumblefucking around in the dark, trying to make sense of this big scary universe that we were dumped into alone, and you're expecting us to have all the answers? No, we're just trying to observe, and those observations can change. There's so many variables. But no, especially religious people will be like, oh, well, your science had the answer, right? No, we just saw some commonalities and some coincidences.
Yeah, I mean, like, science is amazing and fantastic in many, many different ways. But people do use it for their own agenda as well, and they'll use a scientific method to look more legitimate than they are.
It's a tool, not an answer in and of itself. It's the same thing with anything in life, any tool that we use, AI. It could be the answer to everything, or it could be the end of society as we know it. It's how you use it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're coming up towards the end of the interview. I don't know how long we've actually been talking now. It's been a little while.
Yeah. 3 hours probably.
Right, so I think we should start wrapping up, but I have a couple of questions that I didn't get round to asking. I think we covered most of the questions just naturally. Okay. But I had a couple that I thought I might just quick fire at you and see what answers we get. So, sorry, I'm just scrolling through. I did want to ask a little bit about Chris Chan. I don't know if you're aware of Chris Chan.
Oh, yeah, Chris Chan.
I just wondered if you had any... You're a fan?
No. Well, I don't know. Define fan. I definitely like watching an animal at a zoo. It's like, oh, what are they up to now? Very interesting.
Yeah, I just wondered what you thought about that, because one of the big narratives with Chris Chan is that he was actually kind of bullied into becoming trans. And,
I heard about that.
And that and he is obviously heavily autistic. He's not high functioning autistic. He is obviously very debilitated by his autism.
Yeah.
And I always felt really sorry for Chris Chan personally, because I can obviously see how he's been manipulated by trolls online, and he's obviously very suggestible because he is autistic.
Yeah. And
he's kind of been bullied into this situation, and people just make fun of him for it, when I think it's actually a very tragic story personally.
He sort of came to prominence before the internet had any kind of empathy or decency, where it's just like, oh, look at this freak. But again, I didn't see any signs that he was transgender. It kind of happened all of a sudden, and it may have been the power of suggestion. And that's the thing. So the autism community, that's a whole other thing. That they are, it is that kind of outrage culture. SJW was like, no, you can't call us high functioning and low functioning, and you have to just let us do whatever we want, and you can't expect us to change our behavior, and you have to accommodate for all of our needs. And it's just, they're going too far in the extreme of, we need to find some common ground here. And it is a disorder. There are some autistic people who say it is not a disability. It's a social disability, but it's not a real mental disability. It's not a mental illness. It's not this, that, and the, this autism pride gets very intense. But having stood on the outside of autism, just go, oh yeah, no, I was weird. That was a bit. And some are high functioning, can live perfectly normal lives, live independently, but a lot of them can't. And they are emotionally immature, and they always will be. They're always in their own little world. They have this fantasy. Chris Chan's a perfect example of, he takes these characters aimed at children, and he creates this in-depth, dramatic life. That I love that about the autistic community. You see this in fandom, where it's like My Little Pony, Steven Universe. Last night, okay, I'll mention this fanfic specifically in a sec. But all these childhood things, now they're adults, they're infusing weird, confused sexuality into it, and all this dark, dramatic stuff into My Little Pony. Yeah, the other night I wrote a Christine fanfic, Stephen King's Christine, and I was like, has anyone else done any Christine fanfic? Yes, they have, but it was Christine the car, and a robot character from Buzz Lightyear, the 90s cartoon that I vaguely remember watching as a kid. And I knew this person was autistic because I went down this rabbit hole, because this person was so obsessed with Buzz Lightyear and all the characters, and there were stories where they would settle down and have families and have kids, and that's the autistic way of coming to terms with these real world things. They use fiction to come to terms with reality. I was definitely like that as well, which is probably why I thought I was a robot for a while. And so, oh God. And now I'm going to go on a huge thing. I was watching a documentary about object fetishism. So objectum. So they're obsessed with objects. So they have sexual relationships with bridges and fences. And all of them were women. And all of them had either been abused or they were autistic. And I just went, yes, that makes so much sense, that they are afraid of connecting with other people and possibly with their own bodies. And so these objects are a safe thing for them. And I will say, as a mechanophile myself, I am very different, because they aren't attracted to humans. I'm attracted to humans. It's just sort of like, for me, the car is like just an additional accessory. The idea of, like Megan Fox, Shia LaBeouf, Bumblebee. Like, I want to be Shia LaBeouf in that sandwich. So yeah, I don't know what my situation. I think I have more in common with male mechanophiles, where it is just kind of cars are sexy. I'm into it. But yeah, getting back on track. Chris Chan's probably not comfortable with other people. He's probably not comfortable with his own body. And so the suggestion of being transgender just made so much sense. Well, I'm not a manly man, and I don't fit into this mold. And yeah, absolutely, he was very susceptible.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so
I had to smack content in there for 5 minutes.
And the only other question I think, because we've covered everything. Sorry, I'm very quickly trying to scan these questions just to see if we've actually covered anything. One thing we haven't spoken a lot about is your mother, and I did want to speak about that a little bit, but I don't want to do that now because I feel like that might be worth having another discussion, maybe.
I mean, we have talked for hours. I could easily keep talking for a few more hours, so we could do this another time. Okay, great. But yeah, no, my mom. Everyone in my comment section thinks that she's like Carrie's mother in the movie Carrie. I mean, she's not like that. I think I don't hate my mom. It's just that she's an idiot and she's very oblivious and she's just set in her ways. So yeah, it's not like she's a monster. She's she's just an idiot.
Yeah.
And she has unintentionally influenced me in certain ways.
Yeah, which is, I guess, the case for everybody's parents, really, isn't it? When it comes down to it.
You either become them or you become the complete opposite of them.
Yeah. The only other thing I wanted to ask you was, is there any YouTubers that you're fond of, whether they're related to trans issues or not? Like, do you have any particular shout-outs you want to do, or...?
So many... YouTubers in general. But for Detrans stuff, actually, I was recently on his channel, Mars. I don't remember the name of his channel specifically. It's in my guest appearance playlist. But Upper Hand Mars. He kind of does similar stuff to you, where he's a trans man, he's conservative, and he likes to interview people from both sides of the political spectrum and all sorts of issues. So, yeah, check him out. He's great. Okay. And that's a very little channel. And I mean, mostly I'm watching things like Internet Historian and stuff.
Internet Historian, yeah, I love Internet Historian. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, cool. So I think that's basically everything then for this one. So thank you very much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. You've been fantastic this whole discussion. So yeah, really, really good stuff. And yeah, have you got any? Do you want to plug your channel and maybe plug your podcast and whatnot?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on. I am at traviandesigns.com, TRAVIAN, and that's where you'll find most of my stuff. Actually, I need to link my YouTube channel on there. But yeah, that's where you'll find my podcast and my art, my writing, and all of that. But if you want my YouTube channel, it's literally just my name, Courtney Coulson. I should have come up with something, but I don't know. I feel like we're at a weird middle point in internet culture where are we using pseudonyms still, or are we using real professional names, or I don't know. But yeah, it is just my name. And so is my Instagram. Or there's Courtney Coulson Prime, because I believe I am the primary Courtney Coulson. All those others, they're liars.
Okay, cool. All right, well, I'll get some links as well to put in the description for your website and your YouTube as well. So if anybody wants to go and look further, you can look in the description and they'll all be there for you. So yeah, I think that's it. So yeah, thank you again for coming on, and we'll leave it there.